To my guests, we'll come to you in a moment. Let's open the agenda with item 1, apologies for absence first. Are there any apologies for absence?
We have apologies, Chair, from Assemblymember Duval, Assemblymember Bacon and Assemblymember Berry.
Thank you. And I have a number of Chair's announcements. Let me just provide the Assembly with an update in relation to some of the recent work across the Assembly. And I'm happy to say that we continue to have the value of our scrutiny work recognised by others. The House of Commons Committees, Communities and Local Government Select Committee report was very positive about our model. They applauded and welcomed the Assembly's approach and reported very accurately on our purpose and structure. In addition, we recently hosted a meeting of the London Scrutiny Network to share our published and future work with the boroughs so that we're feeding in and knowing what's happening with scrutiny across London. The Housing Committee's work on property guardians was published on Tuesday, looking at how the concept which matches tenants with empty properties should be evolved to provide better protection and conditions for those guardians. The Police and Crime Committee returned to the issue of mayoral elections in Tower Hamlets yesterday and asked the Chief Executive of the borough and others about the steps they'd taken to ensure a fair process in this May's election in light of previous incidences of electoral fraud. And then this coming Monday, our Health Committee is hosting a conference looking at tackling health inequalities in the workplace. Matthew Taylor, Chief Exec of the Royal Society of Arts, is the keynote speaker at that conference, and I understand the Chair would like to extend an invitation to all members. It's in the living room. Thank you, Chair. And now I come to make an announcement. I have received a letter from the Mayor this morning confirming his intention to nominate Dr. Fiona Twycross, Assembly Member, as the first Deputy Mayor for Fire and Resilience with effect from 1st April. Hooray! Applause! What an exciting development. Fiona, we have formal processes to go through. So I think this sort of formal applause is all we can say at the moment. But we absolutely know of your passion and your commitment and the work that you've done over the years in supporting the fire service that protects Londoners. The Mayor will make this formal nomination in March, and that's due to legislative restrictions. And of course, everything is subject to the confirmation hearing processes. But for this morning, we congratulate you on that nomination. Thank you very much. Right, let's go to declarations of interest. Can I ask the Assembly to note the recommendations set out at item 2? Do members have any other declarations to make relevant to the items on the agenda for today's meeting, including in relation to gifts and hospitalities which are not yet reflected on the authorities' register? No, thank you. Can I ask the Assembly to agree the minutes of the London Assembly Mayor's Question Time meeting held on 18th January 2018 to be signed by me as a correct record? Great, thank you. And now we're at section 4, which is a question and answer session with the London Fire and Emergency Planning Authority and London Fire Brigade. I don't understand that. Right, so we've got questions to the Commissioner of the London Fire Brigade and the Chair of LFEPA. So can I then just formally welcome Dany Cotton, QFSM, Commissioner of London Fire Brigade, and Dr. Fiona Twycross AM, Chair of the London Fire and Emergency Planning Authority. Welcome, both of you, formally to the meeting. Now, members, just so that everybody is knowing what the process is here today, there is one lead-off question, and Assembly members may ask supplementary questions after the question has been answered. Before asking the lead-off question, I've agreed that the Assembly will receive a short opening statement from the Commissioner and the Chair of LFEPA of up to 5 minutes in total. So over to our guests.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. So the events of 2017 have had a profound and long-lasting effect on London Fire Brigade and will continue to dominate our work for a long time to come. I look forward to discussing these issues with you this morning, but I wanted to start by setting out my priorities for the year ahead. Clearly, a lot of our work will quite rightly focus on the criminal investigation and the public inquiry into the Grenfell Tower fire. But I also want to ensure that we grasp this once-in-a-generation opportunity to improve building regulations and fire safety. We will continue to work with Dame Judith Hackett on her review, with the Mayor on the draft London plan, and with Assembly members such as AM Shah on sprinklers. In addition to our campaigning on sprinklers and building regs, we will continue to prioritise our campaign on the safety of white goods in people's homes. We recently saw some really good progress on the Total Recalls campaign, with the government announcing a register for recalled products, something we have been long time campaigning for. A big priority for this year will be to ensure that this goes ahead as planned, and we will look at other issues giving us cause for concern in this area, such as the sale of potentially dangerous second-hand goods. Work will also continue to press for measures to improve fire safety in the private rented sector, where we know people are more likely to have a fire. This will include working with landlords to ensure the safety of electrical appliances, lobbying government for electrical safety testing in private rented accommodation to be mandatory, and taking action to tackle rogue landlords who put their tenants' lives at risk. We will see the abolition of LFEPA on the 1st of April, and we are working now to ensure we have the right support mechanism and teams in place to ensure the smooth transition to new governance arrangements. And I'm personally delighted by this morning's announcement of Fiona Twycross for her nomination, and I look forward, I hope, to working with her in the future and continuing to build on the partnership we've established over the last year. We will also continue to comply with good transparency reporting requirements, and we will ensure that Assembly members are kept informed. Operational staff will get new personal protective equipment in October, and work on implementing changes to our watch structure will continue. We'll also see further developments in our Safer Together and Putting People First strategies. And we will continue in our efforts to make London Fire Brigade more representative of the communities we serve and attract the best possible talent into the brigade. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner, and thank you, Chair, for your kind words. I just want to take the opportunity as the last Chair of LFEPA to echo what the Commissioner Dany Cotton has said about the events of 2017. It was a hugely challenging year for London and for the London Fire Brigade, and the aftermath of the Grenfell Tower fire, the tragic loss of life has had and continues to have a profound effect both on our city and on the brigade. I know from previous Assembly meetings how proud the Assembly is of London Fire Brigade and its work, and how much we appreciate the work Dany and her team do to keep Londoners safe. I just wanted to add that if members read the press release, it also announces that the Mayor is intending, as I think we all assumed he would, to keep Dany on in her role as well. So I'm also looking forward to continue to work with her as well. And we owe the Commissioner and her staff a debt of gratitude. This will be the final plenary with the chair of LFEPA in front of the Assembly, and I also wanted to pay tribute as well to the work of LFEPA members, both present and past. I'm sorry Gareth isn't here, able to be here today, but I did want to put on record how, despite our occasional very public differences, I've appreciated his insight to me as former chair of the authority to me in my role. I'm sure we'll be talking more about the governance changes, and Dany mentioned transparency, but I just wanted to add a very quick point about challenge. Good governance involves healthy challenge. LFEPA has sometimes involved good challenge, and sometimes, to be honest, we know that it's just simply been challenging. We've had cross-party agreement on the legal governance changes and on the fact that the Fire Authority is now anachronistic. I'm hugely honoured to have been offered the opportunity by the Mayor to be London's first ever Deputy Mayor for Fire and Resilience. I'm looking forward to working with all of you, with Dany, the Brigade and the Mayor and the new Fire and Resilience Committee to make sure that we get the new system of governance and the new approach to challenge right. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. And now let me put the lead-off question back to you, Fiona. And thank you for referencing challenges. But can you just now expand on what are the key challenges for the London Fire Brigade over the next 12 months?
I think over the past 12 months, the seeds of what the challenges for the coming 12 months have really been shown. So I think as both Dany and I mentioned in our opening statement, the ongoing work around the investigations and the public inquiry into the horrendous Grenfell Tower fire will continue to have a significant impact on the work across the brigade. And I think, as Dany mentioned, we do have a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to make sure that building safety, that fire safety is improved. And I think that hopefully as the Deputy Mayor, with Dany, with you, and with all of London Government, I would hope that we rise to that particular challenge. And it's not just about the public sector housing, it'll also be, as we've seen, about private sector housing. And I think over the coming 12 months, that will remain a key priority and challenge. And the inspections that the Brigade has already carried out will continue into this year. And I think all of us will remember those shots of Dany on the fire ground at Grenfell talking about mental health, talking about the impact of mental health and the impact of that kind of experience on her and her staff. And I think that's something that we all have to be mindful of, is that will continue to be an ongoing challenge for firefighters, for control staff and other brigade staff, in the same way, in a different way, but as it is to the local community. And we also saw last year, and we need to be prepared for, a large number of terror incidents. And I think that on all of those occasions, firefighters were among the first people on the scene. So that's an ongoing challenge that the brigade is constantly aware of. And I know the Commissioner is keen to talk about the new recruitment campaign that we'll be launching next month, but finding the right firefighters for the future, making sure we have a diverse brigade and ensuring that we have a fire brigade that remains focused on the job to be done, as well as dealing with the issues that we've had to face, will be at the forefront of the challenges of the year ahead.
Okay, Commissioner, will you take some more questions so that maybe we can widen it out, unless you had something specific to add to what the Chair has just said?
I'd just like to follow on about the recruitment campaign. As people know, it's one of my priorities to ensure that we recruit and attract the very best people to be firefighters to protect London. And for me, a lot of that is about dispelling the rumours about what a firefighter isn't, and going forward with the firefighting sexism campaign, because for me it's about the opportunities for the future. It's about educating young people, about giving young girls and boys the opportunity to be what they want to be and be the best they can be. And in order to do that, they need to understand the jobs that they can go for in the future. And that starts at a very early age. And that starts with making sure that we make the right impression on children, that we let them understand they can do any job. And that's about gender-neutral language. And that is about tackling things like the media and the use of the word fireman. I was in some ways heartened and disheartened this morning. There's just been a fantastic piece on the news about some of my firefighters who were at the Grenfell fire, who are running the London Marathon to raise money for children in the local community and for the Firefighters charity. And then the responses coming in from the public, and 3 out of the 4 they read out use the word firefighter, and 1 still used the word fireman. We have a long way to go, but for me the importance is about the next generation, about attracting the right people, and about people understanding the new and the different, the complex role of a firefighter, and how important it is to have a set of skills that enable us to engage with our communities, to understand difference, and to go into the community to look at how we prevent fire and how we educate people, and that's really important for me.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Now it's over to members for questions to the Commissioner. We won't be calling you Dany, and the Chair. So, Assembly Member Dismore.
Thank you, Chair, and could I congratulate you both on your, the Commissioner on a reappointment, I guess, and Fiona on your forthcoming appointment as Deputy Mayor. And both are, I'm sure, and I know both of you will do excellent work in those roles. Could I ask Fiona, after the government refused to provide extra funding for the brigade post-Grenfell, either for the extra equipment needed or for the running costs of the brigade, I think we'd all agree the Mayor's decision to step in and provide extra funding for the brigade, sharing the council tax increase with the Met, is a welcome move, and it will secure the finances of the brigade until 2020. However, there's going to be a budget gap after that. How much is the budget gap expected to be in 21 and 22? How can it be bridged, bearing in mind that some of the original ideas we had for savings have had to be shelved in the light of the experience from Grenfell?
I think the budget gap is likely to be around £12 million, so it's quite a considerable budget gap that we need to meet. But the additional funding that is secured through the through the preset rise will reduce the budget gap by around 18.9 million. So it does go quite a long way to meet some of the pressures. As you say, we do have some of the projects that we were hoping to do as part of the London Safety Plan. We're no longer going to go forward with those pilots. And I will hand over to Dany to add something on this at the moment, but I think we have to look imaginatively at how we can make additional savings, because I don't think the public and I don't think everyone in this room would want us to go down the route of further closures or cuts to staff. So whether that's through ambitious blue light collaboration, or whether that's through co-location or imaginative ways of working going forward, or whether that is through an injection of additional funding from the UK government, as we've seen from the Scottish government, I think we need to continue to work to make sure that we do look for efficiencies where they can be found, but we also push to make sure that London Fire Brigade and the government is making sure that our fire brigade and actually all fire brigades across the country are properly resourced.
Yeah, I think from my point of view, very much to echo the fact that, you know, the suggestions that we were going to look at as part of the London Safety Plan about alternate crewing of fire appliances and any reductions of nighttime crewing of operational staff, I think quite rightly have been agreed that that is not an appropriate thing to look at and do now in the wake of last year's events. So it will be about doing something differently. I also want to make clear that, you know, we are what is lovingly termed backroom staff, but for me there are support staff. Our vital function have suffered a lot of reductions in the recent past, and I wouldn't seek to reduce them either. And a lot of those, bearing in mind, are potentially, you know, they are ones who make up some of our more diverse workforce, and also there are some of our lower paid workforce. So I don't want to look at just the automatic option being to cut backroom staff again. They're a vital service, they provide vital function for the London Fire Brigade, and especially going forward into the new world and ensuring we provide the right information and that we're ensuring that we are supplying information to London, to Assembly members and to members of the public. I want to make sure we have the right staff in place to do that. But it is about how we can do things differently. It is about investor save opportunities. It is about blue light collaboration and where that can go in the future. And on Blue Light Collaboration, it's about doing things for the right reason and not just about saving money. It's about improving service, about improving the way we can look after the people of London. And it's about not only how we can work with Blue Light family, but how we work with the GLA family as well, and what savings there might be there and opportunities we can look at, you know, to share services. So we've got a range of options we're going to look at. We never stop looking. It's a constant process for us, but it will have to be done differently, and it will be something that will be a challenge for us.
Well, thank you for that. I mean, since 2010, the Brigade's had £130 million cut from its budget under the Conservatives, which led to the cuts of fire engines, fire stations, firefighters' jobs. And obviously the Anthony Mayor review said there should be no further cuts, and that was, of course, before the experiences of Grenfell. The Chair already asked you about the general challenges facing the Brigade, but could I be a bit more specific? Obviously, we've had the unprecedented events over the last 12 months. But looking forward, what do you see as the major challenges towards resilience? Because that's another part of the job which we tend to overlook sometimes.
Do you want to go?
Well, I think for me, quite rightly, one of the things that, you know, I mean, if you look at both the Mayor and the Harris review and the conversations around resourcing levels and response to new threats, those were all prior to the events of last year. And they both reflected back that they wouldn't want to see, you know, any further cuts, and that we could manage with what we've got now. But quite rightly, following the events of last year, we have had another look at our resources, especially in response to terrorism incidents, because last year brought different challenges, and I think that recognition of the fact that we will never fully understand what the next threat might be, what the next attack might look like, and how we will need to respond to that, is about ensuring that we are prepared, that we are working with other Blue Light partners, that we are constantly training, we're constantly assessing the risk, and we're making sure that we are there. Quite rightly, as the Chair said, we were on the front line responding to all those incidents that took place last year in London. And it is about, every time we have one of those, about going back, doing a debrief, assessing what happened, assessing what it could look like in the future. And much of that is around ensuring that we do train and we do practice, and we do continue with the ongoing, you know, research into what the future could look like. I think that, you know, we have to reach the state where we can never fully anticipate what might happen next. But it is about ensuring that the resources are there, the staff are trained, and we have the best equipment that we can have.
I'd just like to add that actually I think it's really welcome that, and I'm really excited about the fact that the role is Deputy Mayor for Fire and Resilience, because I think the events of the past year have really put resilience far more centre stage than they might have been in the past. It's been seen as something quite niche, but it's important to remember that we've had more major incidents in a year than Boris Johnson did in his entire time as Mayor. And it is very early days, and I'm sort of looking forward to sort of exploring this area of the new role as a matter of priority. We've seen we've got a very established resilience forum in London, but we know improvements can always be made. And resilience planning really has to involve ensuring that we have the capacity in place for the unexpected, as Dany referred to, but also for events that we hope may never happen. And I think there's a few pieces of work coming out. I think somebody's already mentioned, I think Andrew, you might have already mentioned the Harris review. We've also seen a piece of work published recently by London councils on the situation that happened from a local authority perspective post-Grenfell. And the Assembly Oversight Committee is obviously working through a piece of work on resilience. And I hope that all those pieces of work and insights from experts in the field and from people on the ground help inform my work and the work of the GLA and the Fire Brigade in this area.
And Commissioner, following on from that, you've made a lot of recommendations for new equipment and staffing post-Grenfell. How long is it going to take to put in place all your recommendations post-Grenfell, including the new kit like the extended duration BA, the longer turntable ladders, and to recruit the fire safety inspection officers? And what sort of burden is the brigade facing in relation to the investigation and inquiry?
Okay, so in regards to the equipment, obviously we put together a relatively comprehensive shopping list of things that we would seek to improve for the London Fire Brigade post the events of last year. Each of those will be being dealt with individually, so it's not like we're buying a whole supermarket trolley at the same time. They will be subject to individual procurement processes. The most important thing for me is that we make sure that what we're looking at is the best technology for the future, and that we're looking at new developments and new possibilities. So each of those is subject to an individual procurement process. At the moment, we are looking very closely at the extended duration breathing apparatus, and the new technology means that cylinders are lighter. It means that we can have the potential to extend those, but in the same time we have to recognise that our firefighters are human beings, and that, you know, you can have the best equipment in the world that mean they could go into a fire for 4 hours, but actually human bodies aren't designed to do that. So it's about ensuring that we balance that with a reasonable expectation. The extended height aerial ladders, I went over to Germany recently with colleagues from our procurement and our fleet team to have a look at the options available there, to ensure that we actually understood what is available and what options there are. All of these are going to be pieces of equipment that aren't just off the shelf and can't just be bought, unfortunately, you know, as soon as you sign the cheque. They're all subject to a process of building and development. But what I would say is that we are very well down the line of establishing what it is we want and how we want to do it. I would anticipate that it'll be 2019 before we see the first aerial fleet rolling out. Remember, they are part of the replacement of our whole aerial fleet. So we were in the middle of the programme to replace the normal height, extend the turntable ladders. So we will be looking at the whole thing together. So the fleet will come in. It won't come in one. It will start as a rolling process, as we have for the current pumping appliances now. We've also got the aspect of looking at drones and drone technology, which if any of you have any idea about that, it's not my specialised subject, but it's an ever-changing phase and it's an ever-evolving. And literally you can go to the local electrical store and buy a drone for £30 or go and buy a drone for £300,000. It's about ensuring we get the right and relevant equipment, but conscious of the fact we're spending public money on it. Fire safety inspecting officers is obviously something very dear to my heart at the moment. The team I have now have been working tirelessly to service the needs that have come out post-Grenfell. They are unfortunately also not an off-the-shelf product. They are things that some people that you need to supply the right training, and they are also obviously a very popular resource at the moment. So sometimes attracting fire safety officers into the public sector is more tricky because the private sector obviously have different imperatives for attracting them. But it is about making we've got the right staff and they're trained. But it does take a significant length of time to train a fire safety officer. But we have programmes in place now to train staff that we already have and supply additional training. And we have worked on the fact that we've been lucky we've been able to second people in from other fire and rescue services because they recognise we have a greater need. Unfortunately, it isn't something that we can resolve overnight, but it is something that my officers are working on continuously to ensure that we don't take our eye off the ball and we are pressing ahead to get the resources in place as soon as we can.
Okay, Assembly Member Hall.
Good morning, both. Fiona, massive congratulations to you. In your opening statement, you said that we're very proud of the brigade, and of course we are. And we were very happy on this side that Mayor Khan decided to do. I think there were 3 different reports to see how well the service was doing, given the closure of the stations. And of course it came out that the fire brigade was in a very good place. So we were very happy about that. When will you publish the new corporate governance arrangements prior to the abolition of LFEPA?
We're working on the form it will take. Obviously, part of the governance arrangements is down to the Assembly, and later on today we'll be sort of making some decisions as an Assembly about the committee, the Fire and Resilience Committee. There's been a lot of detailed discussions between the GLA and the Fire Brigade, and we had a meeting this week actually to talk about the decision-making process, because I think that what we really need to do is make sure that everyone is confident that we have robust and transparent and public and published decision-making processes. So we had detailed discussions with the Mayor's Chief of Staff, with Sue Budden, the Director of Finance and Contractual Compliance, and with the Brigade's lawyer to talk about what kind of form those might take. So what kind of formal processes would be gone through at the Brigade, both to ensure that people can be clear about the decisions Dany makes, because as those of us who are governance geeks will be aware, Dany actually takes on the entire responsibility of the fire authority. So she effectively, that role, that post, takes on all the responsibilities that the fire authority currently takes, and obviously we have public debates about a lot of the issues. So it's really important from a governance perspective that those decisions are made public. We're currently discussing the level of delegated authority. There will be decisions over a particular financial value that will be made as mayoral or deputy mayoral decisions that be delegated. They won't necessarily be delegated, and we hope to publish details of that, which will take the form of a direction from the mayor to the commissioner as soon as possible. But I think it's really important we get that right. What the Mayor's Chief of Staff is doing is he's going to be writing a letter to Assembly Member Duval as Chair of the Oversight Committee, asking what arrangements in terms of transparency the Assembly wants to make sure that we don't second guess what Assembly members want in terms of the type of information you'd like to continue having, but actually that we get a proper view based on dialogue rather than just sort of assuming that we know what people want. I know this is an issue that Caroline Pidgeon's raised on a number of occasions, as well as a number of other Assembly members.
Yes, I mean, the time is ticking, so given all that there is still to do, when do you hope to have all of that published?
Yes,
I think I'd need to get back to you with an exact date, but we can get back to you. I can take advice. I don't have an exact date on me today, but we can get a date to you as soon as possible.
Okay. I've always been very impressed with the levels of transparency. I've been on LFEPA now for nearly 8 years. What level do you think that we will still get that information?
I think the intention is, as I think the Commissioner said at the Budget and Performance, you weren't at the Budget and Performance Committee, as Sue Budden said at the Budget and Performance Committee, we'd hope to have the same level of transparency as we do now. And I think that's one of the things we'd like to be clear about. We don't want to bombard people with information they don't want, but obviously currently members of LFEPA, and it's normally passed on through political groups to the relevant local assembly member, would get information about details around fatal fires. You'd get information on a quarterly basis or even more regularly through some of the committees. And so it's about defining exactly what level of information people want. I mean, to be honest, sometimes if you over-publish data, people bury things in data. So we want to get this bit right. And I think that's why, as I said, David Bellamy, the Mayor's Chief of Staff, is going to be writing to Len Duval to actually ask him as chair of the Oversight Committee to liaise with all the party groups through the Oversight Committee to identify how and in what form the Assembly would like to get at least the same level of data as you do now.
Lovely, thank you. Will there be a forward plan setting out decisions that are coming forward?
I would assume so. Yes.
Jolly good. And will there be any call-in procedure, as one would do in local authorities, etc.?
In what sense?
If a decision is made and people are not happy with it, the Assembly's not happy in it, will there be any way to deal with that?
I think the principal mechanism for that would be through the committee, and I think we'd hope that would be the robust kind of challenge that I mentioned in my opening statement. On the safety plan, that's a formal statutory. That's a formal statutory plan. So I would assume that the Assembly, in lieu of the authority, would debate and vote on the London safety plan.
Okay, and just to confirm, all the decisions will be online anyway, will
It'll be published, and we can get details to members as soon as possible, and I'll let you know exactly when that will be available.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Assemblymember Hall, I appreciate your question because I've spent hours trying to get my head around the new structure that we'll be dealing with. It's my understanding the Fire Committee will be on the same basis as the Police and Crime Committee. So we will not be bringing in that wonderful action that is used in local government that doesn't apply to us. But over the next few weeks, I'm sure members will become more familiar with the new fire committee, but it will be on the same basis as the London Assembly fire. The nearest one I can think of is the fire, the Police and Crime Committee. Okay. Assembly Member Copley.
Thank you, Chair. And good morning and congratulations to you both. And apologies if I'm coughing my way through this question. My question is on high-rise building inspections. What progress is being made post the Grenfell Tower fire to assure the safety of tall buildings in London, including not just council-owned and social housing, but also privately owned housing blocks and non-housing public and commercial buildings?
So in total, we've received 1,200 building referrals since the Grenfell Tower fire. Most of these have come in through DCLG and the National Fire Chiefs Council. Some building owners have self-presented ahead of engaging, which is very good news. And from those referrals, we've completed over 800 inspections so far. One of our concerns remains the fact that the private sector are not providing as much information to us as we would like. And it's something, we've got ongoing engagement going on, but local authorities are liaising directly with private landlords to try and improve the rate of referrals. But it is something that we are concerned about, and we are very keen that where necessary, you know, the Housing Act is used to ensure private landlords submit samples of their building cladding for inspection. And we would ask that if Assembly members have any ability to help support this process, we would be very grateful for your support with that, because it is something, obviously, we are aware of what we're aware of in local authority buildings, but some of the problems around the private sector is we are not aware of the state of play, and we are not always aware of the risk buildings, and that's a concern to us. Obviously, our main concern will focus first of all and primarily on premises with sleeping accommodation in, because those are the highest risk areas. But once we have got through the tranche of that, we will then be looking obviously at other buildings, and we will then be working closely with people to look at places such as education, health establishments going forward. But our priority at the moment remains focused on both the local authority and private-led buildings, especially high-rise.
Thank you, Commissioner. And those 1,200, are they across all tenures and commercial and residential?
Yes, so those are the 1,200 at the moment we've had as referrals, but obviously are not the complete picture across London of the buildings that we would need to look at.
And with regards to enforcement powers, are they your powers, or are you working in conjunction with the local authorities to use their powers to take action against landlords?
So we're working in conjunction with local authorities,
Thank you.
very much so, and with DCLG as well.
Fiona, if I could come to you now.
Excuse me, now I'm going to have to ask members to refer to our guests by their formal names as Chair and Commissioner.
I thought it might be a bit confusing. We've got two chairs in the room,
No,
Chair.
no, it's not. We've got two deputies now. No, let us stay
Deputy
with
Mayor
format.
Designate.
Designate.
Deputy Mayor Designate.
Yeah.
Chair of the Fire Authority. Apologies, Chair of the Assembly.
DMD.
I've lost my thread now. Thank you.
We can get too familiar.
We've all read. I'm sure we've all read these quite tragic stories of cases where disputes have arisen between freeholders and leaseholders of private buildings as to who should pay for the removal of cladding. What do you think can be done to ensure that leaseholders do not have to foot the bill, and what discussions have you had with governments around this particular issue?
I haven't had conversations personally, but you may be aware that the Mayor wrote to the Secretary of State for the DCLG for earlier this week, relating to the ongoing disputes and the fact that actually the main issue we have at the moment is that disputes can delay really very essential safety work. So I think the Mayor's asking the government to come up with some interim money to make sure that people who are currently being faced with, I think the instances in Croydon were between about 30 and 32,000 pounds. I mean, it's a massive amount on top of people's existing borrowing. So I think that there's a variety of ways that it could be addressed long term, but I think in the short term, the most important thing is that that the work goes ahead. And I think that government has a role to play in making sure that interim measures are put in place so that we don't see a situation in which money is spent not on essential repairs, but on lawyers having disputes in tribunals or in courts around who actually pays for the what we all know are very essential repairs.
Absolutely, I completely agree, and it would be obviously a tragedy if an incident were to occur because of a legal dispute and the materials having not been removed from the building in the first place.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Assembly Member Russell, questions to the Chair or the Commissioner?
Thank you, Chair of the Assembly, and good morning, Chair of the Fire Authority and Commissioner. Commissioner, I wanted to say, first of all, how powerful it was to hear you speaking about the firefighting sexism campaign last week at the Young Women's Trust event upstairs, and how really shocking it was to hear about the very negative reaction from some people on Twitter to the suggestion that Fireman Sam might be renamed Firefighter Sam. And that awful Twitter reaction shows just how much we still have to push for gender equality, as you said in your opening with the talking about the importance of gender-neutral language and why your firefighting sexism campaign is so very important. But beyond the shenanigans on Twitter, have you got any data on how the firefighting sexism campaign is going?
No actual hard data yet. What I was very interested in following the presentation did last week was how much public support came out and how much people responded to the fact that I was talking openly about the negative impact, and that a lot of people, I had a lot of letters written into my office personally from people saying that they were so pleased that their young children could look at the future and see that they could do any role, and that they thought for a long time it was outdated using the use of the word fireman. So we've seen a lot of positive images, we've seen a lot of positive messages. I am still quite dismayed by the fact that it caused so much negative impact, and the fact there were so many people who felt the need to take to all different forms of media, from telephone calls to handwritten letters to emails to the anonymity of social media, to express their concerns by it. It does go to show that there's a long way to go in the world around gender equality. But the heartening thing I found is that it has stimulated the debate and it has put it into the mind. And I think working this year with everything that's happening with 100 years of the first women having the right to vote, with the Mayor's campaign behind every great city, all those things together, I think that if we all work together in partnership and if we all continue to press the agenda, then it does become something that is in people's minds, that people do talk about, that people do challenge. We've seen some very positive response recently by a lot of the tabloid press actually using the word firefighter routinely now. So clearly the message is getting through, we are having an impact, we will continue to monitor it, and where we get what we term as kind of hard evidence, we can supply that to you. But at the moment, the signs are encouraging.
That's fantastic, thank you. And obviously what this leads into is how many of these children growing up now see that they can be a firefighter in the future. So it's a long game. But last year, just looking at the number of women in the brigade, last year you announced that over 300 women were already London firefighters, and that's just 7% of the operational workforce, and you said you wanted to get up to women being 18%, so that the brigade truly reflects, and I'm quoting you, the city that we serve, and that means more women firefighters, but also more applicants from London's diverse communities and cultures. So are you now seeing more women apply to join the brigade, and are you moving towards that 18% target?
So, sadly it's not moving at the speed that I would like it to, but that is dependent on recruitment rate and the amount. We are about to launch a new recruitment campaign on the 8th of March to coincide with International Women's Day, and that is not a date of coincidence, that's a deliberate date that we have chosen to continue that push, to continue with what's going on at the moment. We've also been doing a lot of work in the background with social media and looking at the whole explanation of the role of a firefighter and talking about the skills that people bring to being a firefighter and explaining, you know, the fact that women make great firefighters and using examples of what the job entails. So I think those things, unfortunately, as we've done with all the work we've done previously around, you know, diversity and attraction rates, they take a while to embed. I'm very pleased to announce my outreach team are now out in the communities. We've been running attraction days. We had one last week at Paddington Fire Station where we invite people to come in to understand a bit more about the role of a firefighter, to meet firefighters, both men and women, to try equipment on and to actually to be able to break some of those myths about, you know, looking at what the job actually entails, talking to real people and getting that feedback. All those things definitely have a very positive effect. And I think that, you know, one of the things that definitely for me has been positive feedback is that people seeing that the head of the London Fire Brigade is a woman and that a woman firefighter came in as a firefighter and can achieve that. You know, the positive role modelling is something that I want to continue with because I think all those things are key to all the parts that we make up to looking to the future and to making sure that we are attracting those brilliant people from the community to come and join us.
Thank you. Now, back in 2016, Ron Dobson told me at the Assembly Plenary, that was in September 2016, that the London Fire Brigade just had targets for workforce composition covering senior management and senior staff, and there were no workforce composition targets for gender, BAME, sexual orientation or disability for the operational staff workforce. He actually said targets are something that we need to look very seriously over the life of the equality strategy plan, and we probably will have in the future. Targets had been removed some years ago. So my question is, how are you doing with bringing in targets for operational staff for underrepresented groups?
So I think that one of the things that's really important to me is understanding why we have a target and what it can achieve, and also understanding what the national picture is around targets, because for me, it's about ensuring that I want to make sure London is a step ahead of that. I want to make sure that we are being held up as the shining best practice for recruitment and for attraction and for, you know, our gender balance and our BAME balance. So at the moment, about 13.14% of our workforce are from black and minority ethnic communities. That's nowhere near enough either. If you look at the population of London, you will see that that does not reflect that. So the work we're doing around the outreach, around the attraction, around role modelling our black and minority ethnic firefighters in the community is very important from that. But I do want to make sure that we aren't out of kilter with the rest of the country, and we are looking at the moment around the whole piece around targets. I sit on a national strategy campaign about how we attract and how we recognise diversity in the workforce. I'm one of the leads for that when I work with the LGA on it. And we have been talking, because I do, sadly, what gets measured gets done is one of the things that is true. And when we lost some of those targets, some of that stopped happening. I think the impetus and the drive is different now. I think that the targets has to be recognised about local targets about where you are, because it would be very difficult for us to argue to have the same targets for recruitment of BAME people as, for instance, Norfolk might have, because, you know, their community is different. So for me, it's not about a hard target, because it's about recognising the difference in those communities. So I think that if you just had a BAME target, then you wouldn't necessarily be reaching out to all your community, because you could just achieve that by attracting one specific you know, person, as opposed to the wider range across the board. It is something we look at, it is something we talk about. I also am very keen that we are very much more positive about our recruitment of LGBT people into our communities, from our communities as well. We are actually, you know, considered as quite an employer of choice by the LGBT community, which is fantastic news. We're working with Stonewall again about how we can progress that, and how, and I was quite heartened recently, we did a firefighter transferee campaign, so we opened up the doors from firefighters from the rest of the UK, and we had quite a high percentage of LGBT firefighter supplies come into London. And the attraction rate from the rest of the country to be in London as a firefighter at the moment is very high, both as firefighters and officers.
Fantastic, thank you. Just one more. Shift patterns for people who've got either caring responsibilities for older people or for children. Do you think that there's more that the fire service could do to make working shift patterns more family friendly?
Absolutely. and it's something we're looking at. As part of our Safer Together strategy, we're looking at flexible working, because one size doesn't fit all. We need to recognise that. We have firefighters now who work different shifts. We have some that do just days and some that do just nights to fit in with that caring responsibility, because it just not everyone wants to just work days during the week. Some people want to work weekends because their partners work during the week and it fits in with their caring responsibilities. So it is about being as flexible as we can whilst maintaining the frontline service, which is obviously important, and maintaining our firefighters' operational capability. So we need to make sure that if somebody just chooses for a while to work nights, that they are able to come in and do training days to make sure they are fit and ready to do their job. But we are constantly looking at flexible working and different ways of facilitating people being able to live their lives and do a job.
Fantastic. I'm out of time, so thank you very much.
Assembly Member Pigeon.
Thank you very much. I want to pick up some issues around resilience today. Recommendation 47 in the Lord Harris review stated that the emergency medical response pilot between Fire Brigade and Ambulance Service, which is in a number of boroughs, should be expanded to all London boroughs as quickly as training resources allow. But in the Mayor's 1 year on response to that report, it says the process has been delayed by a national failure in negotiations with Firefighters' pay. Can you provide an update on the scheme and when we can expect to see it rolled out across the capital?
Yes, sadly, this is one of the things that is currently being stalled by the national pay negotiations. There is ongoing negotiations to talk about broadening the role of the firefighter, which is work that the employers and employees side are working on closely together. Some of those issues also sadly rest around funding. So it's about the right pay for firefighters and recognition for the role they do and recognition for the role in the future. And unfortunately the corresponding pilot has concluded as a result of that, and it is something that we are very keen to bring back to the table and start again, because we saw the positive benefits for it in the London boroughs that we had. I think 78 spontaneous return to circulation events where we were directly involved in people being brought back to return and circulation across the 4 boroughs in our pilot time. It demonstrates the value of that scheme and the further work that we could do. Unfortunately, I can't see the light at the end of the tunnel yet. I think that it's a very difficult position we're in, where we want to progress and we want to go forward, but we are still subject to national pay negotiations and ongoing finance issues.
So there's nothing you can do unless this is settled nationally. There's nothing you can do even though this was a success and you want it rolled out.
Sadly not at the moment.
That's a shame. Okay. Can I pick up on the other recommendations? In the Mayor's response to the Lord Harris review stated that recommendation 49 has been resolved. So what I want to know is, does that mean all frontline fire brigade personnel are now immediate emergency care trained?
So the enhanced first aid training is being rolled across all of our frontline firefighters. It's an ongoing programme. We are well underway with ensuring that our firefighters are all IEC trained, and that training is being used day in, day out across London, across a number of medical interventions that people assume normally the firefighter response is to people in fires and people at road traffic collisions. But sadly, with the events going on in London, we are regularly turning up or coming across people being stabbed in the street, and actually we had a recent event where one of our firefighters on a fire crew stopped to assist the police where there'd been a stabbing, and one of the firefighters who had been involved in the trials in one of the 4 pilot boroughs with enhanced first aid stepped in and did some quite, not graphic, not for discussion here, work on assisting with a young lad. Sadly, he lost his life, but they were able to be there to feel empowered to actually step in and do that. So that part of the rollout is going very well and is being very well received across fire stations. And we're also in the process at the moment of getting new defibrillators on frontline appliances, and it's also one of my wishes. I'm in a conversation about having all of our officers who drive around in cars carrying defibs with them as well, because we are as likely as anyone else to come across people in the street having a heart attack.
But the training has not been fully rolled out yet.
Because it's a process of training everybody. It's about being able to release people from frontline duties to go and do the training.
So by when do you expect them all to be trained? What's your
Within 6 months.
Within 6 months, okay. Just the Mayor's report said resolved, so I assumed everyone had been...
It's resolved in that we are doing the
You're
training,
doing
but
it
it's just the process of
6
actually
months.
delivering the training.
Okay, and then in the London Safety Plan, you state that modelling work had identified some fire stations that are in unsuitable locations. And I know you've done some co-location with the ambulance service in Barnet and Stratford and the Met Police, some work at the Holloway station. So what progress are you making with the Blue Light Estates collaboration to really try to maximise the resources of all the blue light services?
So that's an ongoing piece of work, and what we look at is wherever we look at redeveloping any of our sites, we have conversations with blue light partners. But in the meantime, we are finding we are bearing fruits from smaller scale projects like the ones you've talked about, with the LS being at Stratford with us, where we have space in our estates where we're able to share that. And I think the benefit has not only come from the estate sharing, but actually from the partnership working that's coming from that. So by having LAS embedded in some of our fire stations, the ongoing training work that the crews can do together means that when they turn up to operational incidents, they're very familiar with each other, they're familiar with each other's work practice, and that helps resolve incidents in a far better way for the outcome for the people in London. So it's something we are working on continuously. There is a team that looks and meets and talks about it. I also meet regularly with both the Commissioner of the Met Police and the Chief Executive of LAS, and we talk about collaboration opportunities and what we can do going forward in the future together, and we meet regularly and we're very keen to keep that going.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Assembly Member Shaw.
Thank you, Chair. Commissioner and Chair, both of you, very good morning and congratulations. Commissioner, thank you for seeing me last week on the subject of sprinklers, and that's the issue I want to talk to you about today as well. I've got a couple of questions. Can you tell me, please, what is the Fire Authority's stance on the installation of automatic fire sprinkler systems in residential buildings, care homes, and similar buildings where people live in particular? Thank you.
Clearly, it's something the London Fire Brigade are very keen to support. We have seen the benefits of buildings that are sprinklered, and we've seen, you know, how much they can make a difference in extinguishing a fire, raising the alarm and preventing further damage, and therefore saving lives. It's something that we are very keen to see rolled out across London, not only in residential premises, but in places like schools. And I think that, you know, the statistics around what they can do to save money and to prevent fire spread speak for themselves. It's something we've been actively campaigning on for a long time. And as a measure, as part of a measure, a range of options in making buildings safe, we think they are key going forward. We think that all new buildings should be fitted with sprinklers, because obviously the cost to fit them at build stage, you know, is not a significant amount as part of that. I understand it's all about money, but actually if you look on it as a type of insurance, you know, you pay an insurance premium in the hope you'll never have to use it, but if you do want to use it, it pays dividends. Sprinklers are the same for me. If they are fitted in a building and they extinguish a fire and prevent the fire spread, then, you know, they have prevented a large payout in costs for repairs, you know, refurbishment of a building. But actually the main thing for me is about the safety of London and Londoners. And it's about people who use those buildings and about the fact they will be much safer in the event of a fire if there are automatic fire suppression systems in those buildings.
From what I've heard, are you therefore saying that sprinklers are the next steps towards enhancing fire safety for those reasons you explained? A, to save lives, and to really limit massive amount of damage and disruption that occurs when you have fires.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think that, you know, you can look at the financial costs and you can all talk about how much it saves money financially, but what cost a life? Because you can never replace a life that's lost in a fire. And if a sprinkler system can help prevent that happening, then I think that, you know, that's the argument in itself. I recently visited a school in Coshalton that had a sprinkler system fitted and had a small fire that was extinguished very quickly. The school was only lost the use of that classroom for a couple of days, whereas a building in the same area, a school, had suffered a fire and significant damage that involved the relocation of those students and a rebuild of the school and disruption to family life. you know, your child's in school, they want the best learning environment. If they then have to go to a different school while their school's rebuilt, disruption to their education, the cost to that, you know, it's significant.
Very important and critical question. Do you think that there is merit in doing what Wales have done, and that is to make requirement of sprinkler installations in residential buildings mandatory?
Yes, I do.
Thank you. Chair, would you like to add anything?
I think the only thing I'd add is that we know that sprinklers make a difference, and with the brigade attending an average of 1 fire a day where there's an electrical goods fire, we know that in a lot of those cases, were there to have been a sprinkler system in place, then that would have made a difference both in terms of the damage, but also potentially in terms of the outcome. I mean, you'll know yourself that from reading reports about some of the fatalities over the years that come to some of the committees at the Fire Authority, that too often we see reports that we know, when we look at the reports, that if there had been sprinkler systems in place in those buildings those vulnerable residents lived in, there would have been a very different outcome and we wouldn't have been getting those reports.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you.
Okay. Assembly Member Desai.
Again, my congratulations to both of you on your appointments. If I could ask you questions about blue light collaboration and also about the Harris review, and to some extent, some of the questions I was going to ask you have already been covered in your answer, Commissioner, to Assembly Member Pigeon, who happened to get in before me. But if we could start off with blue light collaboration, and noting the answers that you already given to Assembly Member Pigeon, Commissioner, so what are the barriers to the London Fire Brigade's efforts to comply with the duty to collaborate with other blue light services, and have funding cuts affected your ability to in this respect?
I think that, you know, a funding cut should be seen as more of an imperative for us to talk about collaboration, because I think where we are all facing, you know, budget restrictions, that should be the opportunity we should take to then look how we could work together and how we can make better use of our resources. But it's not, as I said, it's not just about that. It's about ensuring that we get better outcomes for people, ensuring that we're working together to improve the service we provide to London, improve the opportunities, especially some of the areas around prevention and response. You know, some of the things we're looking at the moment in safe and well visits. So there's a concept of making every contact count, so that when we are in contact with vulnerable people, if any of the blue light services are in contact, that we make sure that information is shared. So that, you know, if there's a referral and the police or the LAS or someone are aware of a vulnerable person and they think that they could benefit because they haven't got a smoke alarm fitted or could do with a home fire safety visit, it's about how we share that information. So not all of the collaboration, in fact, some of it doesn't cost money. It's about ensuring our systems and our procedures talk to each other to make sure we can share that information. And it is about looking for opportunities in different ways. And the conversation I had very recently with Chris and Garrett from the Met and the LAS was about not necessarily pitching in for huge projects across the collaboration piece that cost a lot of money and require a lot of planning and then may not come to fruition. It's about local initiatives, and it is about ensuring that our partners, so our police and fire borough commanders, are talking to each other about opportunities, whether it is about the estate or whether it is about how we work together and train together. It's about using those opportunities to the best of our abilities and ensuring that we aren't constrained by thinking just in terms of budget savings.
Right. I commend your positive attitude, Commissioner, and also attended the demonstration back in November, which I thought was very impressive and showed in practice how the services can work together. I don't want to press you on this point, but are there any specific obstacles that you're facing right now? Any practical sort of problems in terms of making something that we all want, joint working?
I don't feel there are any specific obstacles. You know, if we all had the magic money tree and the pot of money, we would be able to develop everything very quickly and do all, you know, the things we'd like to do. But that's not reality. But there's nothing specific, and I think the main key is the ongoing dialogue and communication between the blue light services. We have a team embedded in London Fire Brigade headquarters that is specifically around blue light collaboration, that has a partner from each of the agencies on it. looking at a different range of work streams and about how we can progress those. So if any obstacles do come up, we're aware of them very quickly and we're looking at ways to resolve them.
And post-Grenfell actually attended Stratford Fire Station, where you're working with the London Ambulance Service. So coming to the Harris Review, and again I'll start off with you, Commissioner, and of course, Chair, you may wish to come in as well. Noting again your answers to Assemblymember Pigeon and also to Assemblymember Dismore earlier, where are you with the implementation of the fire recommendation of Harris? I know that Assemblymember Pigeon asked you about your response to recommendation 49. So if you could update us. And again, the question of resources. Does the Fire Brigade have adequate resources to implement all the recommendations and the updates to the recommendations of the Harris Review?
So obviously one of the challenges we're facing at the moment is around the rollout of being able to train all firefighters for marauding terrorism. But that again sits in with the development work that's going on at the moment around enhancing the role of firefighters and the pay, and that's the national piece on that. So although we have a response to MTA, which we have, as you've seen on several occasions last year, rolled out fully and responded to those terrorism incidents, the actual development further on about how we are going to train all our firefighters in that front line is something that sits in with the changing role of the firefighter. But in the background, you know, we are making sure that we're doing everything we can to keep up to date with developments, to ensure we're training with our blue light partners, to ensure that we have people embedded in all those teams to make sure that, you know, information is being passed and that, you know, if and when we get the agreement, we will be in a position to roll the training out across all of our workforce.
Okay, I'll leave it at that. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, Assemblymember McCartney.
Yes, I want to ask about something you touched on in your opening. That was the total recall in white goods fires. And from my figures, you had 329 fires last year caused by faulty white goods. And I think you've done some work on the cost to the public purse, and it looks like it's around 19 to 20 million pounds per year that these fires cost London taxpayers. So can I ask you, do you think that the government's working group on product safety is strong enough? I know you talked about a register now being put in place, but what else would you like to see?
So I think that we were very keen. We welcomed the news of the register. We will obviously keep close eye on and keep working very closely to ensure that that comes to fruition and is able to supply the information to members of the public that they need to be able to in a simple way. So I think that part of me is about ensuring that it's accessible to people and people understand how it works. I don't know if you may be aware, just very recently we had a fire in Sidcup that involved a tumble dryer that was subject to product recall, and the woman in the flat, who very fortunately was alerted by her smoke alarm to her fire, but she was completely unaware that her relatively new product was subject to a product recall. So that was an absolute living proof for me of not only the importance of working smoke alarms, because heaven forbid if she hadn't had one, but of the fact that people are just completely unaware. And I think that sometimes people are unaware because they think their goods are fairly new, and they think that because they're new that they must be okay, and that's even more concerning. You know, we would always be striving for more work to be done to ensure, and I think part of the focus we want to make sure is on the second-hand goods market, and that also applies to people in rented accommodation, because obviously if you buy goods yourself and you register it, then it may be far easier for an interaction between you and a company to be subject to a recall. If you go and buy second-hand goods, which, let's face it, lots of people have to because they don't have the money to buy new white goods, you have no idea what the history of that piece of equipment is and whether or not it's subject to recall. We think there should be more emphasis on the people who are selling those goods to be responsible for that. My teams have been out recently and done some work along a range of places that sell second-hand goods and found several of those goods that are subject to product recall that are being sold on to members of the public, and that's a big concern for us.
And does the government seem to be listening to your concerns about that?
I think they're listening more now. I think that they have to listen. I think that when you look at the evidence and when you look at the fires, including the terrible tragedies where people have lost their lives as a result of faulty white goods, and, you know, it's a very difficult argument to have to not be able to do something about it. But it is something we've been campaigning for a long time, so it's not something that's come easy, but it is something we will continue to push for and we will continue to be involved in and support and encourage.
And I know there's been concern about some of the materials that are used to make some of these appliances, such as the backing on fridge freezers, for example. Are you having regular discussions with manufacturers, and are they listening too?
I think the people are starting to listen. I think that nothing shows it quite as brilliantly as some of the visual demonstrations we've done, and some of the the film we've done to demonstrate the difference between white goods that have plastic backing and those that have metal backing, and the spread of fire from that. And it is something that, so we have a team that are working on that and who are in constant dialogue, not only with the manufacturers, but with government and with the different groups that are putting pressure. I think more can be done, and I think that any backing that people can give us and any support we can give us, we welcome, because it is something that's a very serious issue and potentially up till now has not been taken seriously enough.
Thank you. And I'll come to you in a minute if I can, Fiona. But with Brexit happening, a lot of talk about whether we can deregulate or change our standards. Is that giving you concern? And if so, what are you doing to try and ensure that we have the toughest safety standards in this area in future? So we have
a specific team who work in my fire safety department who are campaigning and lobbying to make sure that we are feeding into all those conversations and to make sure our voice is heard, and to keep raising the issue about the importance of regulation, about the importance of enforcement. It is something that we have concerns about, ensuring that standards don't slip. We want them to, standards to be higher and more obligation. So it is ongoing work, but I think with anything you have to be concerned that changes could happen, and we have to make sure that we are there and we are involved in that conversation, so that if we can see it coming, that we can start campaigning and lobbying.
Thank you.
I just want to say, I think this is an example, it's one of the examples of where cross-party working and cross-organisation working has really started to push ahead on some progress. And I think that there was a letter, the team that's been working on this has been plugging away on it since 2016. And it's sort of obviously gained momentum over the last year. But I think in August, the Mayor, the Commissioner, myself, Assemblymember Bacon, the FBU and the National Fire Chiefs Council all wrote a letter jointly to the Prime Minister about sort of raising the importance of pushing ahead on this now. I think it's one of those examples where people come together to really focus people's minds and say, we're all concerned about this, we really do want to see progress, that actually following that letter, which I think was the first joint letter we'd actually sort of got across those broad range of interested parties, we have actually started to see some real progress. Possibly not as much as we'd like, and we've got to see how it works in practice, but I think it is an area that we'll continue to push on, and I think with the support of members in the room, hopefully we'll see some real progress on this really quite scandalous area.
Thank you.
Okay, Assemblymember Cooper.
Thank you very much, Chair. And, like other Assembly members, I'd like to join with adding my congratulations to both of you. It seems very appropriate in the week when we've just celebrated the 100th anniversary of some women being given the vote and changes to the Representation of the People Act to see both a female commissioner and also a yet another woman deputy mayor, which I'm very pleased to say that the mayor has made that part of his modus operandi, I think it would be fair to say, to be very fair in who he's appointed as his deputy mayors, subject of course to the confirmation if there is one. I wanted to come to the overall mayoral green agenda and to talk a bit about what's going on with appliances. I know that the LFB has been developing a memorandum of understanding with the GLA, and I wondered if you could update us on whether that's now been signed off, and the issues around the sunset clauses, and whether you're going to be able to get the appliances in the central area definitely all complying with the ultra-low emission zone, and what the plan is for getting everything else in place as it expands and goes forward.
I can confirm I've signed the Memorandum of Understanding, so I'm pleased to report that we do now have an agreement on that, and that allows us to work towards compliance, and I think it's a sensible solution that we've worked out to make sure that we can continue to work towards compliance. And I think I would like to say that the brigade, and I'll pay tribute to Darren Johnson, who was a former Assemblyman, former LFEPA member, for actually pushing ahead on the green agenda. And I think we've been in a much better position than some of the other functional bodies in other organisations in London as a result. And also Ron Dobson also sort of made the green agenda and making the brigade the most environmentally friendly brigade possible has really helped us sort of be well placed to meet the challenges of making sure that we also meet the environmental standards that we're expecting other organisations to meet.
So we are working on the compliance for our vehicles in the central zone. That's something that we're focusing on, that's a priority. And for me, it's about looking forward as well, and it's about what we're doing to ensure that we are future-proofing our fleet of appliances. And I am quite delighted to say that when I was in Germany, I took the opportunity and I was able to not only see but go for a ride in one of the first prototypes of an all-electric fire appliance, which goes to show that the technology has improved leaps and bounds. I genuinely didn't think I'd see it in my sort of time of being an operational firefighter. I think it's very exciting. I think the developments, are gathering pace, and it means that there's also some flexibility amongst those. So even looking at the potential for appliances that we are looking to commission now, about how we can change them over to become electric in the future. I think that we sit with a group where we're working with TfL as well, obviously very closely because they've got the technology. And it is about looking at business as well, because industry, we want to push them to do more. We want to push them to do it faster because there is an imperative for us. But for them as business, there's an imperative to ensure that they're in the market to attract the right customers. And so we are pushing that agenda, and, we will encourage them, support the development wherever we can, because the technology is there now. It's like everything else. It's changing in size and shape and scope. We all remember the first mobile phones and the suitcase you had to carry as a battery. Now we look at them, things do change and evolve. And I think the electric agenda is one of the things that is really key, that we make sure we're involved in, and we're involved in the production, and that we are there. And, we really want to have London Fire Brigade as the fire and rescue service that is absolutely promoting the use of electric vehicles.
So I think the charging points in stations and perhaps the ability to switch in and out batteries on a rapid basis is going to be a key part of that?
Definitely. So we are looking now to expand our ability to charge vehicles across to the whole of our estate. Some of them are trickier than others to actually work out how we're going to do it, but that's something that's ongoing at the moment.
I think that all sounds very welcome, and I think we'll be keen to hear more about that as it progresses, although I suspect I and probably the rest of the Assembly and probably you would not be so keen to have a discussion about autonomous vehicles and self-driving fire appliances, because that would be rather terrifying. Can I just ask you a little bit, you just mentioned, or we just got into the issue of the buildings and making them suitable to be places where you can charge up electric appliances. And I know that there's been quite an extensive programme of also future-proofing and improving the environmental credentials of the building and reducing, obviously, energy bills. Could you give us an update on where we are with that? How's that progressing? And have we done that on all the stations, or is there still some way to go?
So we're nearing the end of our third stage of refit about energy efficiency and renewable energy measures at 28 stations. 36 stations have been undertaken those prior to that, and we're also making sure that we're installing LED lighting at our fire stations as well. We've got a 5-year plan to further, identify further energy efficiency measures for our fire stations. And so that includes LED lighting, but also things like boiler and combined heat and power upgrades as well. Some of those are quite substantial work, as you can imagine. Some of our property is quite old and needs quite significant measures to take place, but it is really important to recognise we need to do that. We're also increasing the number of solar and photovoltaic installations at our fire stations to ensure that we're making the most of renewable energy, which is very important. Obviously, our new PFI stations are really good models of that, and we can see how much benefit there is for that. So I think we've got a further 3 stations online at the moment to have those installed in at the moment. So we are looking at the whole range of measures, and that also comes down to local initiatives at local fire stations. You know, we've got green champions now across the range of our fire stations. We have our Central League Green Champion, Simon Jakeman, working with us at headquarters in our environmental team, and he has been out and personally visited every single watch on every fire station to talk to them about the benefits and about recycling and about what individuals, how much difference one person can make on a fire station. And that's had a real impact, and we've had lots of people come forward wanting to be green champions and wanting to be the person who's leading their fire station, and almost getting to the point where, you know, we're having competitions about who's achieving most. And that's great, you know, and that is just the art of people wanting to be better and prove that their fire station can be greener, they can do better recycling, you know, they can make sure they're the ones who are ensuring simple things like lights are turned off, windows are closed when the heating's on, the plant spare lights are switched off, and all those things. So I'm really encouraged by local work as well as our station-wide initiatives.
Well, thank you very much for that, and I think local initiatives and a bit of competitive that never goes amiss. Thank you very much. Thanks, Chair.
Assembly Shalomi.
To you both, and just wanted to add my congratulations to you all, both of you, for your new appointment. I do remember watching the tragedy of Grenfell unfold, because this little one was just a week old, so we were watching the news all night long. And just to commend you both for the courage and leadership that you showed through in some of the difficult challenges that London has witnessed over the last year. I wanted to focus on some of the work that the Fire Brigade leads on youth engagement and how we get our young people involved, which is quite important in making sure that they know, A, not the role of firefighters, but B, some of the dangers of fire as well, because unfortunately there are still some incidents. So just wanted to know what your plans are for youth engagement and intervention programs over the next few months.
So it's one of our key priorities is looking at our young people, not only because we recognise that we are, you know, we are seen as trusted people in our communities, and we are seen as also people who can be hugely influential towards young people. And I think the demonstration of the programmes, you know, of our life schemes, of our junior fire setter intervention, and our cadet schemes, and we can see truly the difference that we can make to young people's lives and the influence we can have. And that's a very important role for us. And it's important that we make sure that we're not just stepping into the space about fire safety education, but that we're actively involved in changing communities. So we're making sure that, you know, that it's not only fire, it's about knife crime, it's about tackling the issues around crazy trends on social media, where, you know, people put up terrible challenges to each other that involve dangerous activities through fire, and it's about making sure that we're at the forefront of doing those. You know, we are continuing with our junior fire setter intervention scheme. We're working with the Met Police and police officers in schools, looking at fire-related crimes. We're looking at trying to identify, sadly, you know, we recognise that people are young, getting affected, are younger and younger, that people are influenced, and I think some of that is about social media and about access to information that people never used to have. But, you know, we have got a target to reach 100,000 children and young people annually to deliver fire prevention safety messages. We've not only got the education teams going out, we've got cadets, we've got something called Crossfire, junior fire setter schemes, Prison Me No Way, and the Prince's Trust. So wherever there is an opportunity for London Fire Brigade to be influencing, to be leading, and to be helping to shape our children's future, we're taking that. And I'm really pleased to say that we've planned to expand our fire cadets to hopefully 22 units by September, depending on funding. So any assistance anyone can give with tapping into funding streams for that, we'll be very grateful to receive that. But I've seen so many positive stories from our cadets recently. It completely blows me away looking at the lives that we can influence, the lives we can change, and actually the young people growing into, you know, fully developed adults who have social responsibility, who want to make a change, and those who are now coming through and want to be firefighters. It's just amazing.
I think if you get the opportunity, I'd suggest that anybody go and talk to some of the London Fire Brigade's cadets, and actually we're really hoping that the young people who Dany's mentioned, who are really incredible examples of young people that come and volunteer at events, but they have regular sessions run by volunteers and our cadet team. We're really hoping that they're a major part of the increase in diversity within the brigade through the proposed apprenticeships schemes, so that actually you get the sort of progression from the groups of cadets, where you do get greater diversity than we do in the general Fire Brigade or in the recruitment figures we get. So we're hoping that it's an easier progression for people to go from cadets through an apprentice scheme. So that's one of the things that we're really keen to develop. But one of the life programmes, which is around, is in Lambeth. So I would encourage you, if you haven't already been there, to arrange to go and talk to the team there and see what they do, because all the youth courses, all the youth work, and particularly the life programme push, as well as sort of pushing the anti-fire setting message. They do have a very strong anti-knife crime message, which would resonate with some of the work you're pushing forward on.
And can I just echo that? So I would really like to offer support to any Assembly member who would like to not only visit any of our cadets or youth engagement schemes, but actually if you want to learn more about the work of the firefighters and want to visit fire stations, we're really keen for that. I've got to say Assembly Member Hall has a very impressive record of visiting fire stations. She has done them all. And I think that, you know, not only is it hugely beneficial to have a greater understanding, but the firefighters themselves welcome the opportunity to have that conversation with people, to discuss their concerns, and they are very frank and open and honest in the conversations they have. You know, and then that gets fed back into us. So please, if you would like to take that opportunity, if there's anything you'd like to know more about, please do get in contact and we can facilitate those visits for you, and they'd be very welcome.
Yeah, no, I'd recommend that as well. I've dragged my kids along to the fire stations and they've been really, really helpful. Just lastly, you mentioned 22 units. Do you mean 22 of the cadet schemes across 22 boroughs?
Yeah.
Okay, will they be rolled out across some of the additional boroughs in London?
Our aim is to get a cadet unit in every borough.
Okay.
That's what I definitely want. Some of it is just about resourcing and funding and about making sure that we have the right people available and that we have the funding to be able to put them in place. But I definitely want to have at least one cadet unit in every borough, because several of our cadet units are very oversubscribed, and it's heartbreaking to have to turn people away who want to be cadets.
Yeah, thank you.
Assembly Member Arnold.
Thank you, Acting Chair. Deputy Chair. Okay. Commissioner, I've got some questions for you, and like my colleagues, let me add my congratulations to you on your appointment as the first female fire commissioner. Now, I heard the answers you gave to my colleague's question, to Assembly Member Russell's questions about gender. So I want to ask now specifically about racial diversity. Now, from the LFB's monitoring data of December 2017, I see here that from the operational staff of 4,612, 606 were of BAME heritage, 13.14%. Now, we will all know that that is quite woeful. And can I just add, I asked this question 18 years ago. So for me, it's not that the service hasn't had time. I just think the service needs to get a grip of this issue and take action and do something that will change the profile. So what actions have you got going or plan to take?
So as members of LFEPA will be aware, we conducted a survey using an external company last year to address the issue of why women aren't attracted to being firefighters. We intend to repeat that survey, to survey the BAME community, to look at what the barriers are to people becoming firefighters, and to look at whether it is perception, whether it's about the role itself, and what barriers there are, and actually what barriers we can break down. In line with that, we have our outreach teams that are already now going out into our communities, that are specifically engaging with our target communities, and that specifically is looking at the black and minority ethnic community in London, across the whole range of the diversity, to talk to them about the role of a firefighter, taking out positive role models with them, taking out our black and Asian firefighters into our communities. We are making sure that when we are doing media opportunities, whatever that is, that we make sure that the firefighters that we are depicting reflect the diversity of our firefighters, and more importantly, the diversity we want to see in the future, to make sure that people who see adverts, who see media interviews, actually see that difference. because we know from doing a lot of work previously that actually people are far more likely to look at a job or look at a role where they can see somebody who looks like them in that position.
Okay, so let me come in here and say, over the years, certainly in my constituency, in particular in Hackney, I've met a number of middle managers from Pame Heritage. We even had a deputy of Pame Heritage. Over those years, over 3 boroughs, not one borough commander of Pame Heritage. So how good is the LFB at retaining staff from black and minority heritage?
Actually, our statistics for retention are reasonably good across the piece, but I think that has been in the past due to the fact that the Firefighters pension scheme was something that tied a lot of people in. I don't think we can be complacent in the future because the changing Firefighters pension schemes mean that it will be easier for people to go and seek different employment. So I think retention should be one of our key focuses. We've done quite a lot of work recently about supporting people from underrepresented groups to go through promotion processes, and that's taken a number of different forms to ensure that people feel they're ready to apply for promotion, feel they have the skills and that they've been able to access support and development in order to do that. And as part of my ongoing campaign to develop all staff and to give people access of opportunities, it is about targeting individual people and looking at their needs individually to see what they want.
Okay.
And we are seeing successes there.
Okay, so if I was to go down your management hierarchy, how far down would I have to go before I met a senior member from a Pame Heritage in your management team?
Deputy Assistant Commissioner.
Deputy, good. I see that in the non-operational staff, there you have a better percentage, that is 28.5%, 50% of the total. Let me just ask you this question about something I've raised with the Mayor, and I know he's committed to doing. He's committed to publishing a BAME pay gap data across the GLA group. What impact do you think this will have on the workforce composition of the LFB? Will it show the LFB in good light?
Yes, on the operational side, they will show no pay gap across any of our protected characteristics. So we've already done the work and published the work across the gender pay gap, and we don't have any pay gap across our workforce. I'm not sure what it will look like across the workforce that are not operational firefighters, but I would sincerely hope it will not show a huge detriment. It is something we focus on. We don't just focus on our operational workforce. They are only a percentage of my workforce. The support staff, the teams that work in our mobilising control centre, they are a key part of our organisation. So the focus is as much on them and their career progression and development as it is from our operational staff.
Okay, and just a couple more and then I finish, Chair, quickly. No more. I've run out of time. I'll write you because it was about some information I gleaned from your inclusion board papers. Thank you.
Assembly Member Devonish.
Good morning, Deputy Mayor. If we tried to paint a picture of the Fire Brigade in, say, 8 years, 2024, could you paint me some big pictures of what the real differences will be, please?
In terms of the operational side of...
What will Londoners see generally in
well,
all the areas?
I hope, going back to the conversation the Commissioner's just had with the Chair of the Assembly, I would hope that we would see a workforce that is more representative of London. I think that would be something that if we haven't got a more diverse workforce, I would regard myself as having failed, and I know the Commissioner is very committed to workforce diversity, and it's something we're going to drive through. And going back to the Chair's point, actually one of the things you get with publishing pay gap audits is you get the transparency that I know Assembly members are keen to maintain. So I think we'd want to see that. I'd want to see the reputation of the Fire Brigade continue to be the best in class. I think we've got a fantastic Fire Brigade. We can't be complacent about that. We want to make sure we get the best training, the best recruits, the best career progression we can for any brigade in I was going to say the country, but in the world. And I'd want to actually see the diversity both on the stations and through all the ranks within the brigade. I'd want us to start having the electric fire engines that Dany tried out on her recent trip to Germany. We can't unfortunately buy them now, and I'd want to see us working very closely with the other emergency services. For example, sort of having seen progress on the proposals around a joint control room, and I'd also want to see us having the expanded role and being well past the point of agreement between the employers, the employee side and the government about the transformation of the firefighter role, because I think as the advertising campaign for the recruitment campaign that's coming up next month will say, a firefighter is about so much more than fighting fires, and it could be about a lot more as well.
So when we sit here next year's plenary session, as I'm sure we will do, as the chair's just said, she's been asking questions for quite a few years, more than most of us. Will you be able to give us some numbers, some targets, dare I say it, particularly on the equality issue, but on the other issues? Because if you don't measure something, it doesn't happen, does it?
I also agree that sort of if you really care about something and really want it to change and you want to make progress on something, I do agree with targets. I think sometimes you can be over-obsessed with targets, but I think if we don't have them, then you can't measure it, and you actually, if there's something that you really care about, yes, I agree that you do need to have targets. I'm being part of a working group nationally looking at what kinds of targets on diversity brigades should have, and that paper is going to be published at the Fire Conference next month. This is a spoiler alert, and I'm going to get in trouble for sort of stating some sort of suggestions around figures that might be for diversity, and it's about recruitment. We had a lot of discussions about what should you measure around diversity, and I think members felt, and actually the Home Office agreed as well, that on diversity, the real measure was what recruitment was like now. And it is going to be a relatively slow progress. Fire brigades can't all make large numbers of appointments. It is a career people stay in for most of their career still. So on diversity, I suspect the paper might say that actually brigades should reflect the ethnic diversity of the areas they represent, which is a big challenge, as Jeanette's pointed out, for London. And I think we've done the research on women and why women are put off from joining the brigade, which is sort of the basis of the firefighting sexism campaign. But we'd like to see a situation in which around 1 in 3 of the new recruits would be women. We did have a discussion about making it higher, but to be honest, you've also got to make targets feel achievable. And if you think that Dany was suggesting that a stretch target for the London Fire Brigade would be 18% women firefighters, then actually we do need to be realistic about the challenge and the timescale. So a target of around 1 in 3 recruits being women, I think it was around sort of the mid-20s, sort of in around 7 or 8 years' time, would still be quite a high bar for brigades to reach, but it is one that I think the Mayor's definitely committed to. He raises it every meeting he has with the Commissioner and myself, and we are both also fully committed to it.
Thank you. And I think the Commissioner mentioned, I think she used the word something like full and frank feedback when she goes and sees her staff, and I think Assembly Member Hall has picked that up from visiting all the fire stations. Could you share some of that full and frank feedback? And we politicians often talk, do we? We're all very polite. Give us 1 or 2 examples of what's really, Deputy Mayor, you've been told by the frontline staff since you've taken the role.
I'm still Chair of the Fire Authority. I just want to sort of make that clear. So I'm here as Chair of the Fire Authority, just sort of for form's sake. To be honest, recently it's been about the fact that firefighters feel that they've had their pension rights taken away from them, and they feel that the government should recognise the transformation of the role. We do get issues around parking at the training centre, but those have largely been resolved. But I'm sure, I know Andrew Dismall's been to a lot of fire stations very recently and heard sort of feedback around some of the issues of concern post Grenfell, as have I. And I know the Commissioner, you've gone and talked very frankly about emotional issues and mental health, and challenged people to make sure that they take up the counselling services that have been offered. But the dominant theme of most of the meetings I've had at fire stations lately have been around pay and public sector pay, and the desire for firefighters to have the work that I suspect none of us in this room would want to do, to have it properly recognised, and with the transformation of the role, to actually have that recognised in the way that the Scottish Government now appears to be doing.
Thank you. I think the Commissioner mentioned the transformation team she's got with the Blue Light colleagues. Have you mapped out all the sites, all the land holdings of your service with the other Blue Light services?
The Commissioner, you need to answer that, I think.
Yes, we've been doing that piece of work to look at the property portfolio across all three Blue Light services. That's a piece of work that's ongoing at the moment.
Okay, thank you. And finally, in terms of best practice from other fire brigades across the country and indeed the world, and other public services and other major organisations, is there anything you can share with us that shows that you're looking at that best practice and trying to drive that through into your service?
Yeah, so I regularly meet, so the National Fire Chiefs Council, where all of the chief officers sit from all the UK Fire and Rescue Services. We hold meetings every quarter, and part of the purpose of that meeting is to share best practice and share information, and to ensure that we look across the piece, for instance, things like procurement, issues around sharing information around things like recruitment, diversity, and the challenges we all face. So that's an ongoing piece of work that just goes every quarter we meet. But we have specific individual groups that look at operational equipment. We have ones that look at diversity. We have ones that look at procuring equipment. And London Fire Brigade are key to leading some of those and are very active. We also have the National Operational Guidance, which is now been recognised by Her Majesty's Inspectorate as very good practice, which is where we have one department that is works across the UK Fire and Rescue Service, but is hosted in London Fire Brigade, that produces guidance on policies and procedures for the UK Fire Service. And that's a very positive piece of work, and that's something that we've been very supportive of, both by hosting it and financially, but by pushing the benefits that have been seen from that. So that's something that we're very keen to demonstrate, that as London Fire Brigade, not only are we leading the way, but we are listening and we're sharing that information. I also have meetings. I went and met with the New York Fire Commissioner recently, and was surprised pleasantly by the fact that the issues that we're facing are very similar, and a lot of the change and transformation, we are very pleased to say we are well ahead of some of our colleagues with that. But actually it was very useful to have that, and to have the ongoing. So what I have done is link in my leads and heads in all my team in with the teams in America as well, so that we can also share information. One of the things that I'm very keen that we are doing now, is we're sharing information around firefighter accidents and fatalities across the UK, but across the world. So wherever there is an incident, we are looking at that, and we're looking to make sure that if we mapped our organisation against those, how would we compare? Would there be issues that we would like to address? Are there changes that we could make so that we don't find ourselves in that position? So it's something we do constantly across specific areas, but across a range of services, to make sure that we are not only match fit and ready, but that we are leading the way for the fire service, but we're also prepared to listen and learn, because we might be London Fire Brigade, but we're not always the best at everything, but we strive to be.
I think that's true, and one of the recent examples of where the brigade has learned and is seeking to learn from other brigades has been around that emotional well-being aspect. So we had a team come down from Tyne and Weir Fire Brigade to talk through how their mental health on stations works, and actually sort of looking at how other people do things can really improve the support and offer we have, both to London and Londoners, but also to the staff.
Thank you very much.
Anyone else? Assembly Member Sahota.
First of all, let me add my congratulations on your nomination, Dr. Fiona Twycross, as the Deputy Mayor, and also your reappointment, Commissioner, to the post. I want to talk about the assistance given to the firefighters and to the operation and non-operation staff after the tragic event of Grenfell, and ask you what support was given to the fire service.
Many would be aware, it actually was one of my main priorities in the very short hours during the tragedy and while it was still occurring. And the reason that was brought to life so clearly for me was whilst walking around the fire ground, talking to my firefighters, seeing the effect that responding to the incident at Grenfell Tower had had on them, seeing the visible levels of distress, was like nothing I had ever encountered. And I have been a firefighter for nearly 30 years. I have never seen such emotion on display. Firefighters are pretty resilient on the whole, and they manage to deal with incidents, and then they go back and have debriefing processes. I've never seen such raw emotion at an event because of the scale, the complexity, the difficulties they faced. And it became very clear to me very early on that it was something that was going to be a huge challenge for us, because it was about how we dealt with that, how we gave firefighters support, how we gave the call handlers in our 999 control centre, who were the ones taking the calls on the night, and all the people that were involved in responding, how we made sure we looked after them. And we put some very early interventions in place. As the fire crews left the fire ground at Grenfell, they went via a fire station where they all had access immediately to one of the counselling team to have an initial conversation. We then followed that up with the traditional 28 days, which is a key point in mental health awareness. We've increased our counselling and wellbeing team to ensure that we have the right level of staff available to give that access to people. We've also brought in teams, as the Chair said, from around the country to help support us with that. I've also been in conversation with the Royal Foundation, who supply mental health support to the military, and talking about how we can work in partnership with them. We're also working with the Firefighters Charity, who are a fantastic organisation, who provide ongoing support and residential availability. So we have had watches that have gone together as teams to have, some actual really specific targeted support. I've been going around talking to a lot of firefighters. One of the things that's very important for me is about getting people to understand that it's okay to open up and talk about it. It is not something that people will be judged about. It's not something people will be criticised or viewed as weak. It takes a very strong person to come forward and say, I'm having problems here, I'm struggling with this. And quite a lot of them, it's not just about the events of Grenfell. It was about other things. It's about previous events in their life. It's about previous operational experience. It might be about a previous job they've had. And it's about making sure that we recognise amongst each other those triggers and those symptoms, and that we're alert to mental health issues. And I've been campaigning very strongly for us to have blue light mental health champions in our workplaces, so that people feel there's somebody in their own team that they can turn around and have that conversation with in a safe environment. But also the teams themselves provide fantastic support to each other, and we must recognise the benefits of that individual team being together, having those conversations. Because for some people, I had a visit to North Kensington Fire Station a while after the incident, and they'd had a family day where they invited family and friends in, and actually it was the recognition for the partners of some of those firefighters and the families, and getting them together to be able to talk, because they were all having the same experience where some of the firefighters did not want to go home and discuss it with their families because they were worried about the fact that they were supposed to be seen as the breadwinner and the strong person in their house.
I've only got 42 seconds left,
Sorry,
right? But the level of personnel you got against the council team is the same level as 2008, according to the BBC. Do you have enough resources to give the support these people so much need and deserve?
Yes, we do now. Having increased the staff, I'm very pleased to say we do now, and we do have a wide range of other support that we can call upon, which has been fantastic.
Great. Thank you very much. Thank you for that second answer. But I've only got 17 seconds, but we'll call it a day there. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Right, so now let me just say, offer our thanks to the Chair of LFEPA and the Commissioner for their attendance and for answering the Assembly's questions here today. Thank you very much. Thank you. Now, Part B, can we now turn to the motion set out on the agenda in my name, set out on the agenda in my name in relation to the question and answer session, namely to note the answers to the questions asked. I formally move that motion. Is that motion agreed? Agreed. Okay. Thank you very much. Now, going to item 5, I must ask the members' patience because I've got about a page and a half of script which must formally be read into the record. And it is in relation to the Fire Resilience and Emergency Planning Committee. Can I ask the Assembly to reconfirm the agreement made at the annual meeting unanimously to disapply the proportionality rules where committee membership is not politically proportional in respect of the overall membership of the Assembly, in accordance with the provisions of Section 17 of the Local Government and Housing Act 1989, and to re-establish and allocate seats to the Fire Resilience and Emergency Planning Committee for the remainder for the 2017/18 year on the basis set out at Appendix 2 of a report that you have in front of you. Noting that the Green Party group has indicated that they do not intend to take up the seat previously allocated to them, and noting also that as set out in the report, the committee will only become operational from the date approved by Parliament. Is that agreed unanimously? Thank you. Now, item B, that we appoint further to the GLA Conservatives Group's nomination Assembly Member Susan Hall as a member of the Fire Resilience and Emergency Planning Committee to replace Kemi Bardenok, formerly an Assembly member here, noting that there is no change to the other members previously appointed to the committee and reflected at Appendix 2 of the report. Agreed? Agreed. Right. And item C, there's a recommendation in the report that asks that consideration be given to the appointment of a chair and deputy chair of the Fire Resilience and Planning Committee for the remainder of the 2017/18 year. I have received a request to defer consideration of the matter, and I've agreed, so that matter is hereby deferred. Agreed? Agreed. Thank you very much. That's the end of that important bit of notice for the record. Now, item 6, can I call upon Assembly Member Russell to present the petition listed on the agenda in her name?
Thank you, Chair. I'm presenting a petition on behalf of Jemima Hartshorn, the founder of Mums for Lungs. It's addressed to the Mayor of London. It says, "Dear Mr. Mayor, air pollution in London contributes to 9,500 early deaths every year and is causing thousands of children and babies to develop asthma and breathing problems. Your target is to bring pollution levels to within safe limits by 2030. That is simply too late for this generation of children. We all deserve better. We, the undersigned, are calling on you, Mr. Mayor, to act now and act fast. Clean and healthy air for Londoners by 2020. 529 signatures are recorded here, but however, today 1,763 people have signed the online version.
Okay, thank you very much. Can I ask the Assembly to agree to forward the petition as presented here today to the Mayor for a response?
Agreed. Agreed.
Thank you. Next, can I call on Assembly Member Copley to present the petition listed on the agenda in his name?
Thank you, Chair. The prayer of this petition reads, we, the undersigned, call on Transport for London to reverse the changes to the frequency of the W12's bus route, a lifeline to Whipps Cross and beyond, and restore the service to a frequency that serves the interests of local residents and service users. This petition has 224 signatures, but there are also about 3,000 signatures online as well.
Okay, can I ask the Assembly to agree to forward the petition as presented here today to the Mayor in his capacity as Chair of the Transport for London for a response? Agreed, thank you. Let's go to item 7, petition update. Can I ask the Assembly to note the response received to a petition presented at a recent Assembly plenary meeting as set out in the report? Noted, thank you. And now, item 8, we go to motions, and I'll now be calling on Assembly members to move motions and debate them. The first motion is in the name of Assembly Member Twycross.
I'm sure you've heard enough from me today, so I will try and keep this brief. And I'm very pleased to move this motion in the week that marks the 100th anniversary of some women getting the vote for the first time in this country, and in the year that marks 90 years since equal suffrage. It's right that we mark the occasion, that we remember the struggle women had to get to this milestone, and that we celebrate the painfully and often fatally won progress they made. It's also appropriate for us to use the opportunity to think about what more we need to do, and to welcome the various campaigns and events to celebrate this anniversary and promote further gender equality. I remember being a student in the late 80s and talking to my mother about what happened since the Equal Pay Act. I remember thinking that when I was the same age as her, we wouldn't have a pay gap, and I'm genuinely horrified and actually occasionally apologetic to younger women that we still do. The idea that, according to the World Economic Forum, it could take us another 100 years to get gender equality in the UK assumes that we will also always move forward. But what we've seen, regrettably, is that some things can also reverse. For example, the gender pay gap has grown. There's also currently an assumption that exposing the deep-rooted sexism, discrimination and widespread harassment of women in the workplace, whichever workplace that is, will make it go away somehow. And it will only go away if something happens as a result, and if men and all women also accept the need to change. We can see perceptions slowly changing. Not only do we now have a female Doctor Who, we also have a woman Fire Commissioner, as we saw this morning, and a woman Police Commissioner here in London. Role models matter. Role models really do matter. And we can be proud of both Dany Cotton and Cressida Dick and the work they're doing and the promotions they've had on their merit. As a feminist who believes we need men to sign up to the cause, I'm also proud that we have a mayor who describes himself as a feminist here in City Hall. I hope that campaigns like the Mayor's Behind Every Great City campaign that will run throughout this year will make a difference. It isn't enough for women to be in leadership roles or even to lead the government, although that matters. We need equalities to be threaded through all policy areas, woven into how we function as a society. Only then will we make real progress on gender equalities, and hopefully in less than 100 years. And I do hope this is something that we can all agree on, and that all members will feel able to support this motion today. Thank you.
Assembly Member Cooper, do you want to second now?
I do, and unlike Assembly Member Twycross, I don't feel that you've quite heard enough from me yet today, so I'm going to take up the full 5 minutes. And I'm sure that will be extremely welcome to everybody who's here. I can see that Assembly Member Bailey is obviously very keen. There's probably little that can be added to what Assembly Member Twycross has said in outline, but I do think, you know, this building, over the time since it was set up, has had a very proud history of having a very good number of women who've served as Assembly members, including Baroness Jenny Jones, who's gone on to the House of Lords, Sally Hamwee, similarly, to the House of Lords. And we've now seen Kemi Badenoch recently elected to the House of Commons. And we've had other illustrious members from all sides who've gone to the Commons, Diana Johnson, and so on and so forth. We stand here in 2018 with still that pay gap. But it is 100 years since the Representation of the People's Act was changed so that some women got the vote 100 years ago, and then 90 years ago, all women got the vote as the franchise was extended. We see our second woman Prime Minister serving, and I think we'd all agree that she's serving in particularly difficult political circumstances. I think whoever was the Prime Minister, steering through the choppy waters towards Brexit would be finding that something to be grappled with, just as our own Mayor here has spent the last year with a number of really difficult things taking place in London, terrorist attacks and the fire at Grenfell, but he's been ably assisted by Cressida Dick and Dany Cotton and his fantastic range of deputy mayors who he's appointed, Jaron McCartney and Fiona Twycross, who are here in the chamber with us, but also Val Shawcross, who used to be here, Justine Simons, Shirley Rodriguez, Sophie Linden. They're not just deputy mayors who are serving on the traditional subjects that have been deemed to be the ones that women can be bothered about, but across the range of subject areas. And they also represent London because they are also extremely diverse women. We don't yet have the kind of level of representation that we have here in this chamber in Parliament. There are still only 205 women serving out of 650 MPs. But the Welsh Assembly and the Scottish Parliament have also been much better, as we have. And I think that this year, the Behind the Great Every City campaign from the Mayor, which is also going to see the first woman commemorated to become an icon in Parliament Square, the Millicent Fawcett statue, which is also going to have the names of other people who supported the extension of women's suffrage. That is going to be fantastic. Mrs. Pankhurst is already next to the House of Lords, but you can hardly find the statue. She's in a tiny garden just off to one side. You do have to search around quite a lot to find her. And there is nothing that could be more welcome than seeing that this year that Millicent Fawcett will be on display amongst all of the men in Parliament Square. So I strongly commend this motion to you. I think we have seen a lot of steps forward. We do need equal pay, but let's hope that it doesn't take another 100 years to achieve that. Thank you.
Assembly Member Arnold.
Thank you, Deputy. It's a great pleasure and privilege to be able to stand and join with colleagues in speaking to this motion here today. I fully support everything both the mover and the seconder have said, and I would just like to add my plea for us to acknowledge that we have so much more to do in fighting sexism, the everyday sexism that women encounter. In continuing, as we heard from the Commissioner of the LFB this morning, to using gender-neutral language, because it doesn't matter. In bringing an end to the gender pay gap, it's interesting that this year's International Women's Day's logo is Press for Progress, and don't we need to? Let me just read to you. In coming to work this morning, I picked up the Metro, Thursday, February 18th. Here we are, one of our major supermarkets, Tesco, facing a $4 billion bill for equal pay, right? Tesco's could be landed with this $4 billion bill if an equal pay claim succeeds. I certainly hope that it does, because it is inappropriate for there to be over 200,000 women within an industry that are getting less pay than the men doing the same job. This is of today. This shows the work that we have to do. Just reflect briefly upon my journey in terms of how I understand that what the courage and determination that those women displayed 100 years ago, how they've affected my life. I remember working as a nurse campaigning to ensure that women could sign their own operations. Whilst I was in practice, we could not operate on a woman unless we went and got her consent from her husband or her father. I also recall when women were first able to go into a building society and get their own mortgage without taking their father or their husband with them. And so we take so much for granted, but it's when we have these celebrations that we're able to just reflect back and to say to young people who I think do take these things for granted, we've got so much more work to do. We've got to continue to press for progress. I would also ask all members to join me for International Women's Day event here on 8th of March. And just to confirm that we do have as one of our guest speakers the first feminist of the GLA, the Mayor of London. He'll be speaking there on the evening. And I also want to finish by asking that all groups consider us supporting as an assembly the call for a pardon to those brave pioneers who, without their efforts, we would not be taking for granted those rights that they fought for. I think we can progress this through the Bureau of the Leaders at our next meeting, because I think we, as an assembly, we should be there listed in this call for a pardon. And I commend this motion to this assembly. Thank you.
Assembly Member Pigeon.
Remember, as others have already said, it didn't grant everyone the vote, though clearly it was a big step in the right direction. But in remembering the 100-year anniversary, we should also, I think, remember the advances and setbacks that have taken place in sexual equality. So if you look back, it was the First World War where we saw women entering munitions factories and other workplaces on a mass scale. In some ways, that helped them to secure, finally, the vote. But actually, in a strange anomaly, in 1918, the year women were finally granted the vote, it was also the year when women started again to be excluded from the workforce as soon as the war came to an end. And just a few years ago, Transport for London celebrated 100 years of women in transport, marking the occasion when 100,000 women entered the transport industry in London at the outbreak of the First World War. When we saw things like Maida Vale Station, which opened in June 1915 as part of the Bakerloo line extension, entirely staffed by women. Yet, within 3 years, all of these advances were put into reverse. And it has taken many, many decades for changes to take place in the transport workforce in London. And it may surprise many people that it wasn't until 1978 that Hannah Dadds became the first female tube driver in London. So Tuesday, the 6th of February, and indeed this year, it really is an important anniversary. There is a lot to celebrate. However, the fight for equality, as colleagues have said, is far from over. And let's remember, equality should apply to women whatever their income. And I think the example we've seen recently, where highly paid BBC presenters have been put under the spotlight, is really worrying indeed in this day and age. And I think we also, though, need to give equal attention to some of the examples we've had come through recently, our work on the Police and Crime Committee, where women in London on low incomes are going to prison because they haven't been able to pay their TV licence or their council tax. Both issues are really important, but just because they're either end of the income spectrum, it doesn't mean they shouldn't still have the same focus and light shone on them. So the fight today is as real as ever, and it's really right we celebrate this year. But I really hope that the Mayor will include the Assembly at his events behind every great city this year. I wasn't certainly aware of the event he had Tuesday morning, and I'm sure myself and other colleagues on the Assembly would have liked to have joined him at that. And I hope we're able to join him and others at events throughout this year.
Assembly Member Russell.
Thank you. And the Green Group obviously supports this motion. Of course we do. In 1918, not every woman could vote, as the motion points out. Women under 30 without property or without a man with some still could not have their say. But we must celebrate this really important 100-year anniversary, not least the way the vote was hard won. It wasn't given to women. And we must celebrate that direct action that was such a crucial part of the process of getting listened to. And I'm proud the Greens are still, as part of our philosophical basis and our actions, particularly against fracking at the moment, willing to put our bodies in the way of injustice when democracy lets us down. We still have gaps in equality to fight for, equal pay, and the everyday chore of enduring everyday sexism. Sexist language, however much you want us to shrug it off, grinds us down and fuels abuse. And abuse is something that politicians, if they are female, face more than most, I'm afraid. We saw terrible behaviour, some really upsetting, during the general election last year. And I hope we won't see this at the same scale in the local elections that are coming up. There are many young women standing for council seats, and I do worry for them. When I spoke recently to a group of young Green women considering putting themselves up for election, the first question they had for me was, how much abuse should I expect on social media? This is heartbreaking, and it's really not healthy for our democracy. It is so important that women stand for election, are heard, and that women's points of view are represented. We celebrate women getting the vote and the many women in public life today with this motion, and I hope everyone will support it.
Assembly Member Eshalomi.
Thank you, Deputy Chair. Just to echo everyone's comments, and I very much welcome this motion as well, but we should remember that when women were given that right to vote, a number of BME women were not actually able to vote. And it's still a case that BME women are still underrepresented. So as we continue to fight for gender equality, let's not forget that the fight for racial equality for BME women is still a big issue. BME women are more likely to face unemployment, suffer mental health, be part of the criminal justice system, live in overcrowded conditions, and live in low wage and suffer low wage poverty. Another key issue is around young people in voting. We've seen a rise of young female activists, a number of them seeking public life and actually using their voice in campaigning. A number of them aren't able to vote. I support votes at 16, and it would see a number of young women being able to vote in elections. I do hope that we look at what Scotland is doing in terms of allowing their young people to vote so that we can get more young women to vote in the UK. So just to say that, I hope that this motion is supported, but let's not forget that there's still a big issue for BME women. Thank you.
Assembly Member Bailey.
I just wanted to echo the comments of all my fellow AMs around the table and say something to men. Sometimes as a man you can feel quite divorced from this issue because it talks about the rights of women and the struggle of women over time to be respected in this way. But what I'd like to say is, imagine for a second if our mothers, our daughters, our aunties were treated with the same respect that we are paid at the same rate that we are. What a profound positive effect that would have on all of our family lives. What a different effect it would have on the way we interact with each other. And that small but important point is what I'd like to emphasise for men. This isn't just about the rights of women, this is to the benefit of us all, because we are all linked. We all have women in our family. Women are more prevalent on the earth than men. And in my household, I don't know how it works in yours, the women run my household. I have a daughter who's 11, who at no point do I want her to be disadvantaged because she's a girl. And I have a wife who's absolutely the force in my house, who pushes us all along. So I just commend all of what my colleagues have said to you about the rights of women and equal pay of women and women receiving the vote. And we all know that not all women receive the vote. And women from BME backgrounds in particular still have all those struggles to fight. And I'd just like to think that men, as well as women, will support that fight. Thank you.
That's it. Well done.
Assembly Member Whittle.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, I support the motion completely. I was thrilled, actually, you mentioned about the statue of Emily Pankhurst being rather hidden away, which it is right next to the House of Lords. I have to say, if I've got one qualm, I'd rather like the statue in Parliament Square to have been of her, actually. I think simply because she still is probably the most iconically linked name to the suffragette movement, and I think somehow it would have been appropriate if the statue had been of her. But anyway, that's a minor thing. I'm just reminded, actually, when Sean there, Assembly Member Bailey, talks about his household. I remember that my mom, she did 3 jobs, really, at a time before people talked about how hard it was, how women can have it all. And you know, there are books that come out now by middle-class authors saying, how does she do it, and things like this, and everyone's marveling. Well, my mother worked a job, and she somehow brought us up at the same time. No nannies, no help, no nothing. And I'm sure that that was exactly the same for most people, you know, most working-class people. I just recently saw the movie Suffragette, which I thought was a great film. But also, what it struck me was, why, is it not a good film or what?
Senator McGavron's daughter directed it.
I thought it might be. I saw Gavron and I thought, I thought,
Power to the women.
I thought it was a great film. But what struck me as well about it was the sheer level of principle of people that drove them, you know. That is what is very moving, I think, about it. Congratulations to your daughter for doing that. Anyway, I support the motion completely, and I think it's great also that we make a big fuss about these sort of things 90 or 100 years later. Thank you.
That's it. Thank you very much. Do you want to sum up? It's a bit of a love fest, really.
I think you've heard enough from me. I'm pleased that members have spoken so positively on the motion, so I think I'll leave it as that. We've got quite a lot to get through.
Those in favour of the motion, please show. Unanimity. Thank you very much.
Okay, let's go to second motion in the name of Assembly Member Boff.
Thank you, Chair. The reason this motion is here before us is because this Assembly has taken a view about overcrowding and family housing for very many years. And what it's doing is responding to what is perceived as an absence of importance put against the subject of overcrowding and family housing in the current, in the draft London plan and the housing strategy. Now, the arguments from the Deputy Mayor for housing go something like this, that if we were to build out the SHMA, the Strategic Housing Marketing Assessment, that build out that capacity every year, we would start to solve overcrowding. That number is around 65,000. Now, I'm taking bets from any Assembly member, indeed any Londoner who wants to contact me, that we will not be building 65,000 homes this year, next year, or indeed the year after. I want us to, and every Assembly member would love it if I'm wrong, but we know in our hearts that's not going to happen. So which of that 65,000 of the Strategic Housing Marketing Assessment, which of the 36,335 one-bedroom high-profit flats is going to be, is that going to be the priority to be built? Or the 18,754 three-bedroom homes, family homes, that are suggested in the SHMA? Which one of those is going to be built first? Well, it's obvious. Developers are going to, without guidance, are going to build the one-bedroom flats. And also basing the housing strategy and the London plan so heavily on that SHMA, we must remind ourselves that the SHMA is not weighted. A migrant worker, for example, sharing a flat in Bexley with 4 others for a year, has the same weight in the SHMA as an 8-year-old who's spent her entire life sharing 2 rooms with her 4 brothers and sisters. Now, that is ridiculous. That is ridiculous because obviously the needs are different. And nothing, I would submit, in the draft London plan or the housing strategy addresses that sufficiently. And finally on the SHMA, there is no money attached to addressing overcrowding. It's not about if they build it, they will if you build it, they will come. If you don't pay for it, they won't build it. And unless there's money attached to those aspirations about family housing, we will be letting down those 360,000 children who are being brought up in overcrowded conditions. I've deliberately left a little time just to give a couple of quotes that we had from the Health Committee only the other day, where we had in front of us George Hosking, OBE, who is the founder and CEO of the Wave Trust. And I'm going to quote what he said. He said, and this man is an expert on how the experience that you have in early years affects your life chances, how you become an adult. He said, overcrowding has a very powerful and negative effect on people's health and general quality of life. We're just about to produce a report which is a 3-year study looking at children between the ages of 2 and 18 and understanding why children slide into the lives of severe and multiple disadvantage, by which we mean some combination of homelessness, mental health problems, addiction and criminality. This is not my opinion. This is evidence that has been given to the Health Committee. And the most telling one, and it will take me a little time to read this out, I may do it quickly to get within my 5 minutes, from Geraldine Butler, who's the locality manager for West Haringey Health Visiting Service and at the Hornsey Central Health Centre. Can I just say, having been in lots of overcrowded homes, it is devastating for the families in terms of their child's development. I've been in homes where they can't put their baby on the floor because there's nowhere to put the baby. So that has an impact on the baby's physical development in terms of not having the opportunity to learn how to roll over, to learn how to crawl. All those skills are really important. I'm drawing to a close. I've been in homes where they have no room to put a cot up, so that the baby goes from Moses' basket into a bed sharing and puts the baby at risk of cot death. So I think it is absolutely devastating for those parents living in these situations where they don't have room to put things away. This is what happens if we don't address the overcrowding crisis. And I submit that the London Plan and the draft housing strategy do not let down Londoners. And those people in those positions want a mayor to be on their side. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The seconder? Assembly Member Bailey. Reserve your right. Assembly Member Copley.
Thank you very much, Chair, and we'll say thank you to Andrew for the work that he's done over the years on overcrowding. I actually reread his report, Crowded Houses, from 2011, which made some very good recommendations about how to tackle overcrowding in London. The issue of overcrowding and the issue of delivering enough family-sized housing is something that has cross-party concern on the Assembly, as Assembly Member Boff said. Members from all parties have raised concerns about this repeatedly at Mayor's Question Time and indeed on the Housing Committee. And the Labour Group does share many of those concerns and the concerns in the motion. But I want to set out now why we won't be voting for this motion today. Since the motion was tabled, I've met with the Deputy Mayor for Housing, Deputy Mayor for Housing, James Murray, and he does recognise many of the concerns that the Assembly has raised. And I've received a letter from him which seeks to address, and I think does address, some of the concerns that are set out in this motion. Firstly, the concerns we have in relation to some of the text which unfortunately suggests that perhaps 2-bedroom homes could be regarded as family-sized. He says here in his letter to me, I accept the wording of the draft London Plan, paragraph 4.12.3 about families living in 2-bed homes is not satisfactory, and I will recommend to the Mayor that it be changed. Secondly, one thing that all of us, I think, on the Housing Committee have raised with the Deputy Mayor is the issue of the monitoring, not just of numbers of units, because as Assembly Member Boff has pointed out, it's very easy, it's much easier to churn out 1-bed units than it is to churn out 4-bedroom family-sized homes. We're also interested in bed spaces. And I've received, and in the letter here, the Deputy Mayor says to me, I suggest you include your solution about monitoring bed spaces as part of your response to the draft London Plan, we can then recommend a specific reference to bed spaces in the monitoring chapter during the examination process. I think that would be a really important step forward. And finally, with regards to overcrowding in the housing strategy, the Deputy Mayor writes, I therefore welcome your suggestion of a dedicated section highlighting firm policies to tackle overcrowding in the final housing strategy, and I propose to work with my team towards this goal. Now, I think that those commitments demonstrate real progress, and the Labour Group thinks that these commitments demonstrate real progress. I also think it shows that the Mayor is listening to the Assembly on this issue, and indeed that the Assembly has managed to influence the Mayor on this issue. And of course, one of our key roles as Assembly members is to influence the Mayor and to achieve policy change. So that is why we will not be voting for the motion today, but I still thank Assembly Member Boff for tabling it, and I will assure Assembly members that we will continue the dialogue both with the Mayor and with other parties on the Assembly as we seek to address this very important issue.
Any other speakers? Assembly Member Bailey.
In seconding this motion, I had to ask myself what London means to me. Is London merely a factory where we all come and work and stay in our dormitories? Or is it a place where we live and raise our families? So when you have a policy that is affecting the amount of family units, houses, homes is the word I would use, being built in London, I feel like we have to oppose that. Family life in London is massively expensive, and the imposition of this policy will make it more so. This is sending a signal that if you are a bus driver, there will be no room for your family in the future. This is sending a signal that we are locking in poverty for generations to come. My colleague who spoke before, Andrew Boff, talked about the devastating developmental impacts that overcrowding has. We know that London has overcrowding. We know that there's 8.9 million of us, and there's some suggestion that there'll be 10 million of us shortly. This policy does not help young people in London. London is a young town. London is full of parents and people who'd like to be parents. So I commend this motion to you again. We have to support in that way. When you add to the fact that the small sites policy runs the real risk of robbing us of the current housing we have. We're already stretched. We have a policy that's going to stretch us, and we have another one that's going to take away the meagre provision we have for families already. I'd ask you, in light of that, to support this motion. The only real answer to this is for the Mayor to think again. I welcome the comments by my fellow AM Tom Copley, and I accept some of the changes that they've talked about, that James Murray talked about, but they are not enough. Changing of wording will not give you a place to put your baby. A recommendation to the Mayor is not a cast iron guarantee that there will be some change. And until we get that change from the Mayor, not a recommendation, a change in the policy, in the London Plan, this motion is vital to the continuation of family life in London. Without this, raising a family in London will become impossible for most people. We are about to lose the small amount of family home we have now. If you live in the suburbs, this feels like an attack on the suburbs. And if you live in the centre of town, why that's important, traditionally people have moved further out for more space for their children, for their family to grow. Without that, again, family life in London will be impossible for people who work for a living. So bearing that in mind, I commend you to support this motion because it is so important to what it means to be in London for the future. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Before I call upon Assembly Member Wolf to give his summing up, then had a moment there. Can I ask the Assembly that in accordance with Standing Order 2.9 that we agree to extend the meeting in order to finish the business on the agenda.
Agreed.
Thank you. Assembly Member Boff, your summation, please.
Can I first say that, when many members of the public come to us and say, what do you do on the Assembly? Well, actually, this is what we do. And already we have seen, as a result of cross-party working, some concessions from the Mayor. And I'm very grateful to Tom Copley for putting that to the Mayor. But you have to understand, we haven't seen, I'm a vegetarian, but we haven't seen the beef, have we? We haven't seen the main course here. And I am reluctant to join with the Labour Party and abstain on my own motion, because I think this matters very much to London. And as my colleague, Assembly Member Bailey so eloquently said, thank you for the words. Yeah, I went to a secondary modern, I don't have the
We're
words.
all having moments today.
There are other parts of the London plan as well, not just the ones I cited, which gives cause for concern about the stock of larger housing in London. And so much as I very much appreciate the sincerity that the Labour group have in terms of their commitment to resolving overcrowding, I don't think this is the path we can follow. I wish you well on the path that you're following and put even more pressure on the Mayor. We certainly will. And in James Murray's letter, he actually asks for us to provide a submission. So I'm hoping that as a result of the vote today, we will provide the evidence for that submission. This is very important to the Assembly. It's desperately important to me, and I'll tell you why. I did canvassing one day, and it was in Hackney, and it was many years ago. And I went to a flat in Hoxton, and which was not my ward, but I went to a flat in Hoxton, and I knocked on the door, canvassing as you do, and there was a gentleman in pretty poor. It was 2-bedroom flat. And there was a gentleman. There was damp coming off the walls. It was the worst flat I thought I'd ever seen in my life that somebody had been expected to live in. And there were 7 people in that 2-bedroom flat. 7 people. I was horrified. I thought it can't get much worse than that. And then I went canvassing in my own ward, just a stone's throw from where, literally a stone's throw from where I used to live. And I knocked on the door, 2-bedroom flat. And in that flat, there were 9 people living. This is one of the most serious problems that London has, but it's hidden. It's hidden from us because we assume that there are so many other problems. Overcrowding will be blighting generation upon generation. And when we first passed a motion in this Assembly, many years ago now, I think it was 2010, about how we need to address overcrowding, there are people who were overcrowded then who are overcrowded now. We haven't helped them, and we must give a signal to the Mayor and the administration that this problem must be solved. Thank you.
Well done.
Thank you. Can we now go to the vote? Those in favour of the motion, please show.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 9 in favour, Chair.
9 in favour. Those against the motion? Will Assembly members get it together? Assembly Member O'Connell, when you're ready.
No votes against, Chair.
No votes against. So the motion is passed. 9 in favour. Thank you. Let's move on to motion 8.3. Motion in the name of Assembly Member Dismore, and I will be speaking in this debate, so I'll hand over to Deputy Chair Mr. Arbour.
Assembly Member Dismore. Thank you, Deputy Chair. It's important that we take into account specific requirements of someone's faith, especially when they've lost a loved one and are grieving. Those aren't my words, but those of the Prime Minister yesterday at Prime Minister's questions in response to a question she was asked about the conduct with the senior coroner for Inner North London, Mary Hassell. It's not often, if ever, that the Prime Minister, Jeremy Corbyn, Leader of the Opposition, the mayors and leaders of Hackney, Camden, Tower Hamlets and Islington, the Mayor of London, MPs from across the House, the Jewish and Muslim communities and even the Law Society Gazette can agree on something, but on this issue they do. And I hope and expect all of us here can agree too. The boroughs under Ms Hassell's jurisdiction are home to amongst the largest Jewish and Muslim communities in the country. And according to the Jewish and Muslim faith, it's an important principle that a deceased person should be buried as soon as possible after death, and ideally the day of death. And it's therefore customary to make every effort to expedite the burial. Over the past 4.5 years, bereaved relatives in her jurisdiction have faced bureaucracy and inflexible procedures that have led to delay, especially for those of the Jewish and Muslim faith, who have not seen the bodies of their deceased released promptly. Elsewhere, CT or MRI scans have avoided the need, in many cases, for invasive autopsies, also against the faiths. The failure to allow Jewish relatives to watch over bodies or commence mourning sitting Shiva adds to distress. Ms Hassell is unapologetic over her approach, which she calls the cab rank rule, but hearses don't come off a rank. Different communities have different expectations and needs. And of course, there may be exceptions, but for most bereaved people of Christian, other faith, or indeed no faith backgrounds, we know a funeral is not so time critical and normally arranged sometime later than the day of death or the next day. One has to question what Ms Hassell's motive was in applying for the job here in the first place. Didn't she do any research to establish the needs and the nature of the communities she'd be dealing with? Or in applying for the post was her intention to offer a deliberate and insensitive snub to them? Or has she a hidden agenda implied in her letter to Mayor Biggs of Tower Hamlets, a demand for more resources and better premises? If so, it is outrageous that she's holding these communities hostage in this way as some form of twisted leverage against the council's consortium that pays for her. If she's got a grievance about funding, then she should join the very long queue of public bodies that have faced cuts over the last few years and adapted to circumstances. Whatever the reason, her approach is utterly unacceptable. The problem is no one seems to be able to persuade her or discipline her into behaving in a more sensitive way. The boroughs who pay her and for her office have absolutely no say in the service. The people who pay the piper definitely do not call the tune when it comes to this coroner. Perhaps she relies on judicial independence, but that's no excuse. When I was out of office, I was appointed as a tribunal judge, and part of the judicial selection process is to assess awareness of cultural sensitivity and an ability to respond appropriately. What went wrong here? A number of community members have shared their fear of dying in Ms Hassell's jurisdiction. People have talked of relocating to other parts of London or even leaving the country to avoid dying under her jurisdiction. One lady recently stated she purchased a plot to be buried in Jerusalem and will try to make sure she will not be in London before she dies. One person, an aged Holocaust survivor, said he felt as though he'd returned to a regime of horror and persecution. Ms Hassell's actions are all the more unfortunate when almost all coroners around the UK go out of their way to try to provide a sensitive and appropriate service to people from diverse backgrounds. Coroners around the UK routinely show an understanding of the need for Jews and Muslims to bury quickly and generally take reasonable steps to try to accommodate that need. The conduct of Ms Hassell has been raised at the highest levels of the judiciary and government. It's time for us on the Assembly to add our voice too. We also should write to the Judicial Conducts Investigation Office, the Lord Chancellor, the Chief Coroner and the Lord Chief Justice expressing our serious concern about the comments, decisions and actions of the Coroner, and we should call upon the Mayor to do the same. We have to do all we can to stop Ms Hassell causing our Jewish and Muslim communities this appalling hassle when suffering bereavement on the death of a loved one. London's proud of its multicultural, multi-faith society, and Londoners of whatever faith or none are entitled to benefit from the delivery of their public services in a sensitive way. Ms Hassell should mend her ways or go.
Assembly Member Desai.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, I will be brief as Assembly Member Discord, in my view, has made a strong case for this motion to get your support. The reason I speak and not formally second is because the inner North London Coroner's area covers both Tower Hamlets, an area which I represent in this chamber, and which has the UK's biggest Muslim community, and also Hackney, which has the biggest concentration of Orthodox Jews in Europe. Both communities' religious beliefs call for bodies to be buried as quickly as possible after death. Guidance from the Chief Coroner states, coroners should take account, where possible, of religious requirements. Despite this particular coroner, Ms Hassell, has stated, and I quote, "No death reported to my office will be prioritized over any others
because of the religion of the deceased. I agree with Mayor John Biggs, who wrote to Ms. Hassel, when he says that this statement is at odds with representing one of the most diverse communities in the country, that is Tower Hamlets. It ignores the fact, as I've already said, that in both faiths, bodies should, for religious reasons, be buried as soon as possible after death. Indeed, Tower Hamlets has actually offered funding for an out-of-hours service to minimize delays in burials. This offer has not yet been acted upon by Ms. Hassel, and I joined Tower Hamlets Council and Mayor John Biggs in asking Ms. Hassel as to what urgent action she will be taking to restore confidence in the community. I also joined Mayor Biggs in regarding Ms. Hassel's comments in response to reported delays by her service as poorly judged, inaccurate, and indeed seen by many, very many, in East London as discriminatory. I was at a multi-faith event, Newham Council's annual multi-faith event yesterday evening, speaking to members of the Indian Muslim Federation, members of other faiths. They were appalled by what is going on with this particular coroner's service. So what we are talking about here, colleagues, is not special treatment, but how one of our public bodies demonstrates a degree of flexibility and common sense in delivering the needs of our diverse communities. I have Mayor John Biggs's letter with me, his letter to the coroner. He doesn't talk about prioritization. All it talks about is showing flexibility and common sense. This is an unacceptable situation, colleagues. It is vital that our residents have confidence in the coroner's service. Dealing with the bereavement at the best of times is stressful, and this particular public service should and really needs to respond to the needs of the people it serves. I will be supporting this motion, and this occasion, colleagues, my hand will go up and will stay up.
Assembly Member Arnold.
Thank you, Deputy. Want to follow on from what my colleagues have said. Can I just start by saying that I share the outrage of hundreds of my constituents from across Islington, Hackney and Waltham Forest. And as my colleague has said, Hackney, one of the largest Jewish communities, the Pakistani community in my constituency is the largest in the UK. And it just beggars belief that a public servant who works in one of the most diverse areas in our city would be so insensitive to the needs of grieving relatives and to be so disrespectful of the religious culture and values of the dead. Let me just say, read this out, because I want the voice of my constituents here today. This isn't new from this coroner. My constituent can identify that in 2015, this coroner lost a judicial review when she insisted that a Jewish woman have an invasive autopsy, which was against orthodox law. This ended up with her being ordered to pay 90% of the family's legal costs, and the bill, estimated about 200,000, had to be paid by council payers in North and East London. Right. In 2016, my constituent says, this coroner was formally reprimanded by the Judicial Conduct Investigation for publicising a letter in which she alleged that she had been bullied by the Jewish community. Nothing of the sort. They were asking for respect and for her to do her duty. My constituent says, we live in a country that prides itself on its diversity and multiculturalism. According to the Human Rights Act, every individual has the right to practice their religion freely. However, because of the behaviour of this coroner, the Jewish and Muslim community that fall within her remit have had their rights put aside. I totally support the call made by Assemblymember Dismore and made by Assemblymember Desai. We must write, and sometimes I get so frustration because it feels like writing is not enough, but we must add to the pressure that's building, because somewhere, someone must be responsible for this woman, and this behaviour must have reached a point where somebody has to say enough is enough. So please, on behalf of my constituents and everyone who's grieving, whose respect for their departed one has been infringed upon, please let us act together as one, and let us ask the Mayor to join us in putting forward our concern against the behaviour, the totally unacceptable behaviour of this public servant. Thank you.
Assembly Member Pidgeon.
Thank you very much. This motion is incredibly welcome. I'd like to thank Assemblymember Dismore for bringing this to us today. I'd also like to thank Councillor Ian Shearer of Cazenove Ward in Hackney, who brought this to my attention, who I've been working with. Well, there are some challenges about how inquests and potential autopsies are carried out and meeting the mourning rights of our Jewish and Muslim communities. It seems these are routinely met across the country. These issues that have arisen in inner North London have not arisen in other parts of London. They've not arisen anywhere else in the country. And unlike other areas with large Jewish and Muslim populations, the senior coroner of inner North London does not offer a general out-of-hours service, despite it being part of the chief coroner's model service. And in answer to a recent parliamentary question to the Ministry of Justice asked by Ed Davey, the MP for Kingston, the Minister stated, "The government is clear about the importance of out-of-hours coroner's services and in recent years has worked with local authorities and the police to encourage the deployment of additional staff." So the Minister is absolutely right, but for some reason, the senior coroner for inner North London is ignoring the advice and the recommendations of the Ministry of Justice, the Jewish and Muslim communities and a wide range of politicians. And the senior coroner has also acted in a very insensitive way to members of the community she's supposed to serve. An example is already highlighted through cancelling a protocol to ensure that the ultra-Orthodox community of Stamford Hill could carry out the practice of guarding the body, whereby a member of the community waits with the body. Now, there may be good reasons why coroners have so much independence, but they are not above the law. And a House of Commons library briefing on this issue is really clear. The coroner, as a public authority, is required by the public sector equality duty to have due regard to the needs to eliminate discrimination. So coroners must not act in a way which is incompatible with any of the rights enshrined in the European Convention of Human Rights, and that includes Article 8, covering the rights to respect for private and family life, and Article 9, freedom of thought, conscience and religion. And it's so frustrating, because I, as others here have been looking into it seems the only way to appeal against decisions made by the coroner in North London is through a judicial review. And obviously the Chair has given a number of examples of that before my words. I hope this isn't necessary, and I hope the concerns raised today across this chamber and in recent weeks by the Mayor, numerous London MPs, councillors, a Board of Deputies of British Jews and others may finally be heard and we get this issue resolved.
Assembly Member Boff.
There is a... Can I say, first of all, there's been a debates in the House of Commons, that place up the river, about this, and both sides of the House have been united in expressing concerns about the behaviour of the coroner. But you see, there is a completely... For those who are a little concerned about that, this looks like a couple of faiths queue jumping, because that's been put to me. It's not about that. It's about respecting individual families and their needs. And I think if a Christian family were to make that request, if a humanist family were to make that request, that the body be dealt with quickly, that is something that the coroner should take reasonable efforts to accommodate. And what's happening here is those reasonable efforts are not being taken. And I think it is of some considerable concern, worth the attention of this assembly, to say that really public services are about services to the public, and we must respect what the public want at a time when the last thing they want to talk about is bureaucratic delays. The last thing you want to hear about. So I support the motion brought to us today, and I hope that some common sense can creep into this debate, into the conduct of the coroner.
Assembly Member. Assembly Member Prince. There you are. You had one and I had one. Assembly Member Prince.
Thank you, Chairman.
Couldn't
Very
even
kind.
read it.
Thank you, Leonie. As someone who represents one of the larger Jewish communities in London, in fact, once upon a time, my area had the largest Jewish community in Europe, and also someone who represents a very large Muslim community as well. I really do thank you, Andrew, for this motion. It's very important. I've been doing some work in my own area where one of the boroughs has a 7-day service for what's called the green slip, which is something you have to get in order to get your loved ones buried. And one of them doesn't, but I've been negotiating with them, and I'm pleased to say that very soon they will have a joint service so that anybody who needs a green slip on a Saturday or a Sunday will be able to get one on a 7-day basis and able to bury their loved ones within the time they need. I also, of course, my wife, as many of you know, is from Nigeria. She herself is a Christian, but her family are Muslims. Parents were Muslims, and she, again, had a situation where her mother died, and in Nigeria they buried the person the same day, because that's part of the faith. And unfortunately, she wasn't able to get home for her mother's burial in time. But that just underlines how important it is, though, really, for us to respect other people's religions. And it's not a case of, oh, we treat everybody the same, because we don't all have the same needs. You know, you go to the doctor, he doesn't say, well, you can have aspirin or penicillin, because that's all he gives you the treatment that you need for your ailment. And it's the same with religions. Different religions have different requirements. And the great thing about this country is that we understand that, and it's our tolerance and our acceptance of other people's beliefs and religions, or indeed not having any beliefs or religion. And for some employee of the state to dictate what she is going to do and how she is going to do her job is just completely wrong. And it's not just a question of whether or not she is accountable. I think it goes beyond that, and we should be saying the system shouldn't allow this to go on. And if there is a situation like this occurs, then the system needs to change, because we can't have employees of the state, civil servants, dictating what people can and cannot believe, or when or where they cannot believe bury their loved ones. So thanks again, Andrew, and you'll have our full support.
Assembly Member Dismore to sum up.
Thank you, Deputy Chair, and I'm grateful to everybody who's spoken, and I think it's been a very thoughtful and supportive debate for this issue. And Camden is the lead borough, which is why I brought the motion forward. And dealing with Councillor Abdul Hai, who's the lead member in Camden for this, the frustration he's felt in trying to get some common sense into this, and it is common sense, is unbelievable. No matter how many meetings they have, no matter how many discussions they have, both on and off the record, they simply cannot make any progress with us. And it's starting to come through. I've had over 1,000 emails about this. I had a petition of nearly 3,000 signatures, which I've given to the Mayor. And it doesn't have to be that way. In Barnet, my other borough, many years ago when I was an MP, we had an issue very similar, but it was resolved through discussion and common sense. And as far as I'm aware, we haven't had any problems since. And it is a question of making reasonable adjustments for people's faith. It is about having due regard to the needs to eliminate discrimination. And as Assemblyman Boff has said, it's not about queue jumping, it is about respect. And the best example I can give of that was when I was an MP, one of the exercises I always gave prospective staff was half a dozen different scenarios of people who are coming to the surgery. And I'd say, how would you prioritise between these? Because it is about reflecting the different priorities of different people, as Assemblymember Prince has said. And it can be accommodated with common sense and frankly, good manners, as part of anything else. And I just find it bizarre that our system cannot find a way of dealing with this. You know, judicial independence is important, but there has to be limits somehow. And as I said, when I was interviewed to be a tribunal judge, one of the things you're asked about on the application form, on the qualification exercise you have to do in writing, the exam, and in the interviews is very much focused on this. How on earth this situation arrived? Why on earth she even applied for this job? Knowing the diverse nature of London, I find absolutely astounding. Something has to be done. The best thing we can do, the only thing we can do, is to put pressure on the powers that be and add our voice. And please, judging by the debate so far, we're going to have unanimity today on that issue.
Okay.
Those in favour of the motion, please show. You have unanimity.
Excellent. Next motion in the name of Assemblymember Copley.
Thank you, Chair. Now, Assembly members may have noted I'm suffering a bit with a cold and a cough at the moment.
Care, but
which
it's
part of my speech, Chair. Simply stop interrupting. The Chair has got something against me today, I think. Now, as members may have noticed, I'm suffering a bit with a cold, and it is not helped by the fact that I live in a flat with one of the lowest energy efficiency ratings. It's a band F property. I love the flat, but if as I did last night, you forget to switch the heating on for the next morning, it's a bit like waking up outside. Now, of course, so that which is obviously quite unpleasant, and of course means that my energy bills are very high. Now, the government has proposed some minimum energy efficiency standards, which will come into force in April next year, which will make it illegal to rent out flats that are rated band F or band G. And they propose to set a cap of £2,500 of cost to the landlord for bringing up properties to a higher standard. Now, I very much welcome this, but there is a general consensus amongst campaigning groups that the £2,500 cap on landlord spending is too low. And groups have got together to call for a £5,000 cap, which would mean an extra 120,000 properties being brought up to standard. Now, for someone like me living in a band F property, that would save an average of £510 a year in energy bills. For someone living in a band G property, the lowest rating, it would save people about £990. And that's before you get to the even more important point, which is the impact that energy inefficient homes have on people's health. They cause enormous problems, of course, for people's health, particularly for older people. And there was a tragic story not so long ago of someone who died from the cold because they couldn't afford to heat their flat. So I hope that Assembly members will join with me in calling on the government to raise that cap to £5,000. For a landlord who owns probably quite an expensive property, in the great scheme of things, that's not an awful lot of money. To a tenant, in terms of the annual savings to their energy bills and the benefits to their health, it's worth an awful lot. So I hope members will vote for this motion today.
Assemblymember Cooper to second.
Assemblymember Copley has said most of the things that need to be said about why this motion is so important. Given that interest rates have been so low, there's a lot of landlords who've been renting out properties on a buy-to-let basis who have very low outgoings and have in many cases made quite a lot of money. So to raise the cap from 2,500 to 5,000 is actually not going to impinge that greatly on their income, and in any case, and many cases, would improve the value of the property itself in terms of the rental market. The higher the quality of a property, the better it is. But to look at it not so much from the landlord point of view and why investing in a property is a good thing for a landlord to do, with all due respect to Assembly Member Copley, he falls into the category of people who are least affected by living in cold and damp properties. People in their 20s, 30s, 40s and 50s are much less affected by this. Assembly Member Eshalomi has conveniently brought someone who would be deeply affected by living in that damp property, far more so than Assembly Member Copley, the now sleeping Malachi just behind her. And the same with people of older years as well. And of course, one of the issues in London is the number of people now living in private rented accommodation has simply gone up. And that includes people in the older age groups as well. So it's really important for the health of, the very young, the numbers of children now living in privately rented accommodation, and also for the number of people who are older who are living in privately rented accommodation, that this Assembly supports this motion to raise the cap. It's not a lot to ask for landlords to make this small investment, and it has benefits for them, but enormous benefits in terms of the health for their tenants. I second.
Assembly Member Boff.
I'm afraid the unanimity won't be continuing. Sorry about that. I think it's already we've already seen that the government has taken action on this issue. It's been welcome, but we should always remind ourselves that landlord costs are tenant costs, and what this would result in is increased costs for the tenants as well. I won't be averse to reconsidering this in the future once we've let this bed in, but at the moment I think it's too soon to say it's wrong, and so we won't at this time be supporting this motion.
Okay, Assembly Member Copley.
Well, just very briefly to sum up, thank you to Assemblymember Cooper and Assemblymember Boff for their contributions. Just to say, on the point that Assemblymember Boff makes, of course, this will save tenants money and energy bills, but also, in the absence of any kind of rent regulation and rent control, rents are set by the market. So even if a landlord does have to invest money in the property, it's not possible for the landlord just to pass that cost directly onto the tenant. And as Assemblymember Cooper quite rightly pointed out, you would see as a landlord an increase in the value of your property.
Okay, thank you. Let's go to the vote. Can I see those in favour of this motion?
13 in favour, Chair.
Thank you. Can I see those against?
6 against, Chair.
Right. The motion is passed. 13 in favour, 6 against. Next motion in the name of Assembly Member Hall.
Firstly, you'll all be very pleased to hear that I'm considering Assembly Member Copley. If he is cold at home, he is now very cold at work, as every single one of us here are. I think enough hot air comes from us, but not enough, it would appear today, to heat the room. Now, I believe lots has been said over the past about London and Partners. You'll forgive me, I'm new here, so I haven't heard it. But I brought this motion to the Assembly because of my reservations around the performance and the transparency of London and Partners. In a recent Economies Committee meeting, London and Partners were guests, and the Deputy Mayor was there, and the Deputy Mayor was making much of the fact that small businesses were the lifeblood of London's economy, which I'm sure we all agree with. And then on questioning the gentleman from London and Partners, he admitted that they actually only worked with 145 small businesses. That they actually didn't really work at all with micro businesses, that they'd only actually worked with 340 large companies. And when I asked why the numbers were so small, the answer I was given, well, that it's funding. So I said, how much money goes into the work you do with businesses then? And the answer was £7 million. So that was of concern to me, and I'm sure it was of concern to others that were listening. They also said that they worked with all the boroughs. Well, I only contacted 3 boroughs and was told that they weren't working with them, which also was of concern. There's clearly a lack of transparency here. I hear there aren't many on its ruling trustee body, and I think that is of concern. And therefore, I'll keep this short. I think they should be more accountable before they receive the additional 1.8 million that the Mayor wants to put into their budget. I think we should have far more sight on what they're doing. I think they should be far more accountable for what they're doing. And so I would urge you, because we are responsible for an awful lot of taxpayers' money, or our Mayor is, we need to be spending that properly, especially in times when things are tight financially. So I would urge my colleagues to support this motion. Thank you.
Assembly Member Russell, seconder.
Thank you, Chair. I'm very happy to second this motion from Assembly Member Hall. London and Partners should not be getting £1.8 million. That's a 15% increase to their budget in 2018-19. I'm seconding this motion because I believe, as outlined in the Green Group budget amendment last month, that the London and Partners budget could be better spent on ensuring the economic resilience of this city, rather than being funnelled into an unaccountable body, which Assemblymember Hall has just outlined, without a current business plan that we can even scrutinise. I asked the Mayor in December how much each of the new 6 London and Partners overseas offices would cost to set up and run, and he wouldn't actually give me any figures. So I question the whole mission of London and Partners. Do they work with grassroots groups and really put social return at the heart of what they're doing? Do we really need a body to promote London, a city which arguably can speak for itself? So instead of putting more money into London and Partners, in the Green Group budget amendment that I put the other week, we suggested that the Mayor should channel this proposed budget increase towards supporting and mentoring businesses that have suffered a catastrophic event in their area. He could use that 1.5 million to create a small business resilience fund for those business communities where a major emergency has caused a serious disruption to their trade and footfall. And he should also be using that money, the remaining 300,000 of it, to boost his existing community projects funding so that it's more inclusive and open to those communities that have least. The Mayor could do so much more good with this 1.8 million if he put it into initiatives that would help ordinary Londoners and didn't just use it to top up the bloated London and Partners budget. And that's why I'm seconding this motion.
Thank you. I received an amendment to this motion but ruled it out of order. But I want to call Dr. Sahata. You've got the floor.
Thank you. I rise to speak on behalf of the Labour Group, and whilst we're disappointed that you ruled our amendment out of order, I respect your decision on this matter. The purpose of that amendment was to make the motion much more valuable and appropriate. Of course, what this really is a budget debate motion. And having missed the opportunity last time round, which would have forced the Mayor to respond to their request, they now think they can sneak it in through the back door. And the answer is they can't. And much more fundamentally than that, what this motion does is deprive funds to the London and Partners. Correct. Currently, we're going through Brexit. My colleague, Assemblymember Cooper, called it the choppy waters of Brexit. I think it's more like a storm. It's a hurricane that's going on there. If you talk to industry, tornado, even better. If you talk to the industry, the uncertainty that's going through this country, the businesses affected, the Prime Minister doesn't know where we're going, we need someone to speak up for London. And when London does best, the country does best also. So this is a time when we should be asking London and partners to go and fly the flag for London, to bring out business, to build up those new relationships that we so much need now we're coming out of the European Union. And what does this motion does? It cuts its funding. Now, we were agreed, they were unanimously agreed that we want more accountability from London and partners. We want more transparency. We want that organisation to sign up to the DLA governance regulations. We want there to be KPIs for its deliveries. But this motion doesn't call for that. Yes, it does. This motion calls for a reduction in their budget. Now, I remember in December 2014, Assembly member Stephen Knight put forward a motion and he got unanimous approval here. We all signed up to the agreement, to the idea there should be more transparency. We all signed up to the fact that there should be more KPIs. We all signed up to the fact that we should know what that money is well being spent and we're getting the value for the money given by Londoners. Yeah. But what this budget does, what this motion does, doesn't deliver that. This motion wants to curtail the budget of the LNP when he most needs it, and that's why we don't support this motion. We will be voting against it, principally because it's the wrong time and the wrong motion for the purposes being introduced. Thank you.
Assemblymember Bailey.
Just to be clear, for the avoidance of doubt, this has nothing to do with a budget motion. London and partners have no track record. They have no.
Excuse me.
They have no record of delivering for London. None whatsoever. No business plan we can scrutinise, no transparency. Yes, Stephen Knight may have put down a motion that we all agreed on, but nothing was delivered on. We still don't have an Assembly member on London Partners Board to see what they're up to. They do not have a business plan. They were useless before Brexit. There's no indication in anything they have given to us, because of course they haven't given us anything, about how useful they'll be during or after Brexit. So when somebody says that we do not want to increase their budget by such a huge amount, I feel that can be supported.
It's too late.
Our Green member ably gave us an idea of where that money could be better spent. Agree or not, she gave more detail in that 2 minutes than London and Partners have given in the whole entire year. We have no way of measuring what they've done. They haven't begun to tell us what they'd like to do. So the idea that we can give them extra money to set up abroad, remembering they cannot tell us how much that's going to cost, is ridiculous. So when I say to you, I commend this motion to you, this isn't about London and Partners. This is about the sanctity of the office of the Mayor of London. This is about people taking the London Assembly seriously. If we want people to take us seriously, if we want to see that we are scrutinising the Mayor, we cannot give this money to London and Partners, because there's nothing for us to scrutinise. So if someone says to you, what does London Assembly do? Right just now, you could definitely say we don't scrutinise London and Partners. Because then the obvious answer would be, well, why are we giving them extra money if we do not scrutinise them? There is nothing to scrutinise. They have no track record. This isn't about we missed it in a budget amendment. It's about the fact that London and Partners do not deliver for London, Brexit or not. I commend you to vote for this motion, because it has many, many more strands than the fact that we think we missed something procedurally. Thank you.
Assemblymember Prince.
Just as well you wrote it down, Madam Mayor. Madam Mayor, sorry.
It's very cold in here. Dame will do.
I was obviously drifting into another place in another life where I served.
Dame will do.
Madam Chair, sorry. Anyway, I think I've just heard the best speech that Assembly Member Russell has ever made.
Oh.
Well, certainly from where I'm sitting, anyway. A very, very well made speech, and very sensible. London and Partners, I've had dealings with them in the past, and they are very, very quick, very swift at claiming the credit for all the good things that happen in London. But I've never actually seen them justify any of it. I've never ever seen any facts or any figures that actually ties them in with all this new business that comes into London. Yes, there is lots of new business that comes into London because lots of people want to come and do business in London, but how that actually manages to be as a result of the interventions or the proactiveness of London and Partners, I'm not very sure. And as we know, it's such a massively transparent organisation that information isn't shared with us. So why on earth we would want to throw more money at an organisation that is literally sticking two fingers up at us, I don't know. I don't know why. We've asked them on a number of occasions to comply with different aspects. I won't go into the detail, it's all in the motion, and they haven't done it, and yet we want to throw more money at us. And then we get speeches from the party opposite talking about it's all to do with Brexit. Well, London and Partners may well have a role to play when it comes to trading in London, but they certainly have nothing to do with negotiating this country leaving the Socialist Republic of Europe. And we do not we do not also have to have the mayor doesn't have to spend all his time running around trying to negotiate Brexit as well, because that's what he seems to do a lot of time. He should be actually in London dealing with the issues that we have here in London. We've got the worst increase in crime that this capital has seen for many, many years, and yet he's rushing around trying to do the job that the Prime Minister should be doing. So I'm very sorry. Dr. Sohata, you are wrong when you say that this is to do with the budget. It's not to do with the budget. It's about actually trying to bring this organisation to heel. I don't have any problem in giving them more funding so that they can do a good job for London if they can prove that they're doing something, and if they are prepared to comply with the very basic requirements, the same as we have to do. We have to declare our expenses and what we're doing and where we're doing it, and so should they. And until they want to play ball with us, we certainly shouldn't be throwing money at them. So I absolutely recommend this to members, and I think that suggestions that made by Assemblymember Russell were spot on, much better way of using our money, and thank you, Assemblymember Hall, for bringing this to our attention.
Assemblymember Curtin.
Thank you, Chair. I wasn't going to speak on this motion, actually, but Assemblymember Sohota really needs a reply to his comments, because he tried to turn this motion to being about Brexit, as Assemblymember Prince has said, and he said that Brexit is going to be a storm. Well, it certainly is going to be a storm to the unelected bureaucrats in Brussels, who might find themselves out of a job and might find themselves having to do something real for a living, like making cars or planting tomatoes or something. However, this motion is a very good motion, because we don't just have unelected bureaucrats in Brussels. It seems that we have some in London as well, with London and Partners. And I do agree, actually, with Assemblymember Russell saying that London can promote itself. It doesn't need London and Partners, and that's particularly going to be very, very true, and even more true after Brexit actually happens, and I'm looking forward to that day. With this motion, I absolutely agree with the motion. London and Partners doesn't need any extra money. Indeed, how can they justify the money that they already have? As we've heard from other people around the room very sensibly, there doesn't seem to be much accountability or any results from the money that we put into them. So I'm very happy on behalf of UKIP to support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Assemblymember Pigeon.
Thank you. I wasn't going to speak on this. I really wasn't.
Please, the member's got the floor.
What an extraordinary debate, an extraordinary discussion. This is about a budget. Your final paragraph is clearly saying that the Mayor's budget should not be as he's put forward, and it should be at the current level budget for London and Partners. And let's be clear, I've been here 10 years. I am not a fan of London and Partners or its predecessor. But I'm sorry, at this extraordinary time we're in, at a time, and it is around Brexit, it is around our role in the whole world, the idea that we're not going to invest in work, and it's not just work overseas, quite frankly, as we heard from London and Partners and others, but it's about retaining businesses in our great city that fuels the UK economy as a whole. You know, unless we try to retain these businesses and work with them, as well as try to grow the city, then my goodness, we are in even bigger trouble than we thought after Brexit, if Brexit indeed does happen. But I have to say, what I think would be a good way forward, and it might be something members might want to consider when we come to the budget meeting, is presumably we can do a budget motion. And assuming the Mayor does go ahead with this additional funding for London and Partners, we could put a motion forward suggesting that there should be some very clear targets, key performance indicators around that we would hope would bring some transparency to this work of London and Partners, and let them demonstrate to us the extra value they have got over the coming year in their work and what investment they have managed to secure and retain in London. And I think that's probably the best way forward here. And I would hope we can conclude soon so some of us can get some lunch.
Yes. Can I just come in here and just say we will have on the 22nd of the month an opportunity to deal with budget relation motions. Just try and remind members they are not binding. It will be part of us getting up and using our rights to speak. It is the budget amendment that is binding, and we did not get a budget amendment to this budget. Okay, so can I have then Assembly Member Dismal?
Thank you, Chair. I think you've just made an important point. They missed the boat.
Thank you.
They missed the boat. Why not didn't they do it before? We have our criticisms of London and Partners, the same as everybody else. But I have to say, I find it bizarre that we've got a Green UKIP alliance now. And I'm sure the Green supporters, probably even the UKIP supporters, very interesting to know who their bedfellows actually are. And for Assemblymember Bailey and Assemblymember Prince say this is not a budget motion, having had a seconder in the form of the Greens who spoke nothing other than as a budget motion, is absolutely bizarre. And then Assemblymember Prince goes on about rising crime. Well, the reason we've got rising crime is we've had £1 billion sliced off the Metropolitan Police budget by his government. And I don't see if that's not a budget issue, I don't know what is. So, really, what really, to my mind, takes the biscuit is UKIP opposing this motion. After Brexit, we're in the run-up to Brexit. They want us to go out selling London, selling this country around the world, in China and India and all sorts of other places we've probably never even heard of. That's what he wants us to do. How do we do that? We need the agency to do it. And he wants to vote against it. He wants to vote against having the money. The Mayor is doing the best he possibly can to minimise the impact of Brexit, and the UKIP want to make it even worse. Frankly, this motion is a joke. Yes, we have serious criticisms of London and Partners, but talking about the budget in this way is completely wrong and out of order. If anything was out of order, it wasn't our amendment, it was the motion in the first place.
I wasn't asked to rule on that. Assembly Member Russell, summation. Hall. No, sorry. Oh, sorry, Assembly Member Hall.
That's all right, Chair. I appreciate now you're all cold and hungry, so I'll just keep it very quick. I am disappointed that this has been mentioned as a budget issue. I think it's an important issue. You said, Dr. Sahota, that we need someone to speak up for London. Yes, we do. And we need somebody to speak up for Londoners' money, taxpayers' money, and this is £1.8 million that should not go into an organisation that it seems to be agreed upon right round the table isn't doing what they're supposed to be doing. So the more we should be looking into this, and I think this is an appropriate time to bring it up. Surely, as an Assembly member, if you see things that are not right, you should be bringing them up. Yeah. That is what we're here for. We are a scrutiny body, and that's what we should be doing. And if things aren't going right, we need to be standing here and saying so. And at that point, I will let you warm up and get your lunches. But bear in mind, we are a scrutiny body, and there is something significantly wrong when we can't scrutinise a company that is spending millions of pounds of taxpayers' money.
Can I ask to see those in favour of the motion?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 in favour, Chair.
8 in favour. Those against the motion?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 against, Chair.
The motion is lost, scrutinised by the Oversight Committee and by the Economy Committee, just so that we're clear about that. Let's go to item 9, date of next meeting. Next meeting of the London Assembly, scheduled to be the Mayor's Question Time meeting, which takes place at 10 a.m. on Thursday, 22nd February 2018, in the Chamber at City Hall, the principal business of which is to consider and debate the Mayor's final draft GLA Group consolidated budget for 2018-19. Any other business considered urgent? There are no urgent business, except to say those members who wish to have a photo taken with the Firefighting Sexism sign, please stay in the chamber. I'm going to bang the gong, and thank you for your attendance here today.
Thank you very much.
GLA Chamber Sound.